as you're speaking to the report. Members of the committee, leave your camera on at all times, and I will introduce you as queued in the system internally in the chamber, and I'll be kept right on anyone who wants to come in online. But before we begin the committee proper, can I ask you to mute your microphones, and can I ask Councillor Cal McLean to lead us in a word of prayer?
Lord our God, we come into your presence once more this morning, acknowledging that you are God. You created us, you made us, and you made us for one purpose, to glorify you and to enjoy you forever. Give thanks, O God, for your goodness to us up to this time, that you do take care of us, irrespective of how much we fall away and fail in what we were created to do. We ask you, O God, that you would be with us in our deliberations this morning. Bless the chair over us, and we ask that you would be the director of the various committees. We ask, O Lord, that you would bless him, would bless all who work in Comhairle and all who are busy in their work, whether it is at home or in office. And remember us at these difficult times. We ask you, O Lord, that you would help us in everything that we do, that we would have our eyes fixed upon you continually. For we have been given these responsibilities, and we have to carry them out in accordance with your will. Help us to do so. Remember all connected with us. We remember our families, in particular at this time. Remember particularly our elderly. We think of them, those in their own home, who are constrained to do what they used to do. We ask you, Lord, that you would help them and bless them. Bless them, those that are lonely. We think of them today who are restricted from going out and about. We ask, O Lord, that you would help them. And to remember our young as well, growing up in this day where we fear there is such a license to sin, where good is called evil and evil is called good. Oh, gracious God, we ask that you would bring us back. Help us to look to you as the God who is able to deliver us, even from this great pandemic. Help us to come and confess our need of you, find that we leave you so much out of our lives. Oh Lord, you are the great physician. You are the only one that is able to deliver us. We ask that we would come, even today, acknowledging our need of you, our sin, and acknowledging that you are a God that is infinite in mercy. For you gave your only Son to die for us. And we bless you for his work and the work that he carries on. He is still alive and making intercession for those who come to him. And we ask, O Lord, that you would help us then. Bless us then together. Keep us from falling. Give all our sins. We ask it for Jesus' sake. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. Just a reminder, just to have a quick thought about declaration of interest for members. If they do declare an interest, they must leave the chamber or end the call if coming in remotely. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded, so the recording will be made available on the council's website shortly after the meeting. First matter on the agenda is a minute of the meeting of 21st September 2021. That is there for noting, for approval. I beg your pardon, yes. Yeah. I take it approved. No, dissent. Thank you. And just as a reminder again, the declaration of interest, members are asked to declare any interest they have in any item on the agenda. It would be helpful if members express why they are declaring that interest. Members in the chamber, please do so now by pressing your microphone or through Teams by using the raise hand function. No declarations of interest at this stage. Again, just if you do become aware of an interest as the meeting progresses, please indicate that at the most appropriate time. The next item on our agenda is the police and fire, a standing item, and Comhairle and share local police area performance against the Comhairle's local policing plan for 2020-2023. The report is by the Area Commander, Chief Inspector Alison MacLeod, who is online, and I believe he's online anyway. I think I saw him earlier on. Oh, good morning, Chief Inspector. If you want to just take us through your report and highlight any of the salient points you would wish to bring to our particular attention. So it's over to you.
Thanks very much, Chair. Good morning, everybody. The first thing I want to mention briefly is I'm hoping Stephen circulated around the members for a new format, a proposed new format for this report. I would just ask those that have any comments to make in terms of the content or the presentation of that report, they can feed back directly to me. It's just the intention there basically is to try and come up with a report that makes it easier for the committee to perform its scrutiny function. The current report's been it's served its purpose for quite a long time, but we'd like to make something that's a bit more forward-looking, has a bit more context, and not quite so focused just on statistics. So I'm really interested to hear what the members have to say about that. I'll move on. The report's been circulated covering the year to date, so meaning 1st of April to the 30th of September this year, and the comparison is with the same period for last year. I don't propose to go through every line on this report. There's a fair amount of statistical information in there. There are one or two things I want to highlight and to provide a little bit of context around. But obviously, if anybody's got a point to make or a question to ask about anything that I don't cover, then please just butt in or put your hand up and stop me as we're going along, and I'll do my best to answer your queries. So the first priority there is road safety and road crime as per the policing plan. Intention to work with partners, collaborate to reduce casualties and crime on our roads. The main way we do that obviously is through the Operational Road Safety Delivery Group, which continues to meet monthly. That's chaired by Inspector Jane McKenzie, who's on the meeting today observing. So from an enforcement perspective, what we're trying to do is to balance targeted activity for maximum effect against that objective, whilst also responding to the reports we get from communities about the various hotspots for speeding or other road traffic offending that causing concern. That's a balance we're having to try and achieve constantly. In that, we continue to be supported by Divisional Roads Policing. They have a schedule to service the islands on a regular basis. They were in Lewis for a few days in mid-October carrying out enforcement. Prior to that, they were in Uist and Lewis again in July. We don't tend to publicise the activity of the Roads Policing Unit in advance. They will put media out afterwards. But fair to say that it doesn't take long before they're off the ferry, after they're off the ferry, before people are well aware of their presence on the island. But by way of a bit of context about the proactivity that goes on in terms of enforcement, before I go into the actual crime stats, we've recorded the issue of about 183 fixed penalties, mainly the conditional offer fixed penalties in the Western Isles in the year to date. That compares to 82 in the same period last year. It's comparable, if slightly higher than pre-pandemic years. The lower figure last year, like most things, is affected by the lower volume of traffic on the road due to lockdowns. Also in the year to date, we've recorded at least 16 incidences of drivers being warned in terms of Section 127 of the Antisocial Behaviour Act 2004. In some cases, when they're on their second warning, seizing their vehicles. That's antisocial behaviour of drivers is something we receive quite a lot of complaints about. So that's one of the main tools we have to deal with that. And I would like to see us doing a bit more of that, but it is a piece of legislation that we do use regularly. Going to the report itself, the first line there is about fatalities on the road. So unfortunately, we finished the previous counting year with 1 fatality having taken place on our roads. Sadly, we're not going to achieve a reduction in that this year because, as you can see there, we've already had 1 fatality in this counting year so far. The rise in drink and drug driving offences you can see there is quite marked, from 8 to 30 year on year. It is concerning on the surface of it. Looking at it and drilling down into that, there's no discernible pattern to who's committing or being caught drink and drug driving. It's a combination of intelligence-led stops and proactive policing. You know, for example, if somebody gets stopped for a minor road traffic offence or because of the manner of their driving and they get breathalyzed. So if I look at the more recent figures, indicative figures up to the end of last week, they do tend to suggest that this is flattening out and getting a bit closer to where we would expect it to be against the 5-year average. But we are coming into the festive season when we might expect to see an increase in this kind of offending. So the festive campaign, which happens every year, obviously nationally, that's starting on the 1st of December across Scotland. We'll be supporting this locally in the command area, as well as reinforcing the national educational messages through local media and our social media channels. I'll be tasking officers to directed static patrols, including early morning for morning after offenders. We'll make this activity public in advance in the hope that it'll act as a deterrent and we can make people think twice. But you will see static road checks taking place through the festive period. The other figure in that section that shows a significant rise is the speeding offences, and that's gone from 48 up to 105, an increase of 57. As I mentioned already, we've been particularly proactive in enforcing the speed limits as a contribution to road safety. But again, it's also reflective of the return to normal traffic volumes after lockdown. If you look at 5-year averages for these figures, the rise isn't quite as dramatic as that. It is disappointing to continue to see so many people falling foul, but we believe enforcement is an important part of that strategy to reduce casualties, and we'll keep doing what we're doing in that respect. So, that enforcement activity will continue. That's all I was proposing to say on that priority. I'll move on to the rest of the report if there's no questions at this stage. Serious and organised crime is the next priority there. And as reflected in the objective there, the main ways in which organised criminals victimise people in the Western Isles continues to be in the supply of controlled drugs, and to an increasing extent through cybercrime. The police's efforts to deal with the supply of drugs into the island continues to be a combination of intelligence-led activities to target dealing activity and other detection methods to take as much as possible out of the system before it reaches its intended destination. Beyond that, we keep on working with our partners, particularly in the Alcohol and Drugs Partnership, to reduce the harm caused by drugs in the community here. In line with the Scottish Government's policies on harm reduction, Police Scotland nationally is rolling out the issuing of naloxone to officers who are quite often on the scene when an overdose takes place, or first on the scene when an overdose takes place. This is something that's being evaluated in certain divisions at the moment, so we're not seeing it in the Western Isles yet, but there's clear evidence that it's working effectively on a number of occasions. If I speak briefly about the drug types that we're seeing. You're all aware, obviously, of the drug death statistics for Scotland as a whole, being pretty much the worst in Europe. Of note, the Scottish Government's Drug Death Task Force particularly identifies the rise in what we would term street benzodiazepines, which you know, are the drug type prescribed as diazepam, temazepam, Valium, that kind of thing. They're identified as being key to Scotland's current really difficult problems with drug deaths. Opiates have been consistently implicated in a high proportion of drug deaths over the years, but in the last 10 years, benzos have gone from being implicated in almost none to about 65% of all drug deaths. And I'm talking nationally here, obviously not local to the Western Isles. These drugs are usually taken along with other drugs, and this is particularly dangerous, partly because people don't know the strength of the tablets that they're buying and taking, and also because the combination of that along with different drug types places greater strain on the organs, and it's particularly dangerous. I just highlight this for information really of the committee. Benzodiazepines are something that we seize commonly in the Western Isles, so it's not something we're immune to, and you know, we're working away and taking as much of that out of the system as possible. But you know, for reassurance, you know, the ADP is well aware of this kind of trend as well. So we're all working together on this. Intelligence from the community is key to the enforcement side of dealing with this, and I suppose I won't waste an opportunity to highlight that publicly and to ask for support for the public by reporting any information they have on the supply of controlled drugs, even if they want to do so anonymously.
Can I just maybe pause? I'm getting an echo here. I see two members, sir. Vice Chair, did you want to come in? I saw your microphone on, and
well, it was actually to do with the previous section.
Sorry, I just
no, it's just that I was going to suggest that you know, the number of cases of people detected for speeding, could that be given some publicity, because you know, it's gone up by over 100%, I suppose, and yeah, to highlight, because it is a continuing problem, particularly in the town. I don't know about outside the town, but it's certainly one that should be highlighted, that you know, the detection rate has been very successful on this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mackenzie. I suppose, having heard what Chief Inspector said, that social media and the Bush Telegraph seems to work particularly quickly in communities like this, and despite that, the significant rise in the number of people being caught speeding is of concern. And I think anything that can highlight and the consequences of speeding as well in terms of the legal sanctions, I think that would be helpful as well. Of course, the other consequences are some of the other statistics we can sometimes find on our pages as well. Councillor Callum McLean, did you want to come in with a question?
Can I ask Inspector MacLeod? Your last talk was on the serious and organised crime. You talked about, particularly about the misuse of drugs. Now, if any of us have been in contact in the community, I'm sure the highest element within our communities is drug misuse. I've been talking about that last week and the week before, and probably the week before that. There is a serious issue in our community with drug misuse. I don't know if any of you have got that, but certainly I have, and I've got it from parents. Now, you don't seem to have the data in there, Inspector MacLeod. I'm not saying that I'm giving you more work, but for instance, detection rate, searches, whatever have you. Have you still got the dog on patrol? Because a number of parents have actually said that they seem to believe that there's not so much emphasis on drug detection. Now, I know that that's going on. I know you are doing what you can do, and the schools are doing what they can do. But there is, I don't know if you would agree with me, there is a problem, but it's in Scotland anyway. So if what's in Scotland is bound to be in the Western Isles. But particularly in the last couple of weeks, I have been speaking to a number of people, and this has been the main problem that they've talked about.
Thank you very much for that question, Councillor McLean. Can I maybe just ask Chief Inspector Hall? I've got two other members, and maybe that they might be related, or you might be able to answer them all in the one reply. So, Councillor Finlay Stewart, and then Councillor Norm MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. It's just an observation I made myself, having been involved with someone who took a drug overdose, and when I went out or phoned A&E to ask if they had been in touch with the police, they told me that they don't get in touch with the police. That if they were to get in touch with the police every time someone takes an overdose, that the police would never be away from the place. But the thing is, there was no record then of where this had happened, what home it had happened in, who was involved with the boy who took the overdose. There was other people in the house at the same time who I believe were supplying, and I think you're missing out there, that you're not getting all that information. I mean, I don't think it's a lot for A&E to get in touch with the police when there is an overdose like that, so they can follow that up and see exactly where it's happened. And I mean, the ambulance was present, but there was no police present at the address. So there was another two people in the house with that boy. So I think that is something that maybe we should be looking at. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stewart. If we just hold that question, and I'm sure the Chief Inspector will come back on that as well. And just take another final point from Councillor Norm MacDonald, Skeeter Road.
Thanks, Chair. Norrie MacDonald, Skeeter Road. I'm not a member of your committee, and this probably might sound trivial by comparison with issues with drugs, which are obviously very significantly more serious. I don't know if it's a personal bugbear of mine, but the amount of cyclists in Stornoway with no lights on, causing a danger to probably more importantly themselves. No lights, no high-vis, no anything over the last, particularly this year, I think. It's been an issue for several years, but this year in particular, they seem to be going out in gangs of 4 to 15 on their bikes through the town, weaving in and out of traffic, doing wheelies, dressed completely in black. I commented on it a couple of weeks ago. They're like ninjas wandering around the place, and my worry is that somebody's going to hit them and kill them, and they'll be the ones liable. I don't see anybody stopping them, but I did speak to one of your officers who assured me that they were proactive in trying to stop them, and when they do bring them back to the parental home, they get the height of abuse just as much as anybody else. So they're proactively trying to stop it, but there's only so much that your officers can do. Are they breaking a law if under the age of 16? Is there anything that can be done against them? I mean, somebody did get back to me and said there's actually a law that has been broken here. And I know it's on the scale of all the other things that you have to do. I mean, major traffic offences with speeding and with drink driving and with drugs, probably make this pale into somewhat insignificance, but it is an issue in the town. I just wonder, what is the situation, and is there anything that can be done to target them and possibly stop them from committing hara-kiri on the roads?
Thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald. Chief Inspector, do you want to address these questions just now, and we can move on to your next section?
I will do, yeah, thanks. I'll just take them in order they came. So in terms of the publicity about the speeding, that's not a problem. I'm quite happy to put something out in relation to the figures locally. Dare I say, it might attract a bit of media attention anyway, having been discussed here today. But I'll certainly proactively put something out about that. Councillor McLean, in relation to the drug situation in general, yeah, all I can do is provide kind of reassurance. The dog is still here. We're taking every opportunity we can to act on intelligence that we receive about drugs. As in most communities, there's a lot of information out there which doesn't always find its way to the police for various reasons, and we are kind of very reliant on that kind of information coming in, either through reporting or anonymously through Crime Stoppers, that kind of thing. The issues around the schools and among young people in particular, again, referring to the ADP and other partnership work we do kind of share information with our partners, and we do try to address these things at the source as quickly as possible. So I do recognise the concerns. I share the concerns. We do have drugs in our community. I'd like to see us catching more people in the act of supplying them, and that's a constant area of work for us. So I think I can only try and provide a bit of reassurance that we're working away on that in every way we can, through enforcement, through the detection dog, and through partnership working, and so that continues to be a main priority for me in the Western Isles. We're not immune, unfortunately, to the harm that's caused by drugs. We're protected to a degree from the direct involvement of organised crime that we see in mainland Highland up to this point. I'm not complacent about that either, though. We're not seeing the county lines involvement making its way across the Minch yet. I wouldn't wish us to be complacent about that, but the drugs that people are taking here are dangerous, and unfortunately from time to time people are succumbing, and as I spoke about the benzodiazepines earlier, there's a lot of that coming in to the island even through the post, and I don't think it's particularly difficult to get hold of that stuff on the internet and have it delivered, intelligence would suggest. So there are various lines we're trying to take in addressing that. Some of it leads to people ending up in court, but a lot of the time it just involves the commodities being taken out of circulation and not necessarily being attributed to any individual. So yeah, I just want to try and provide a wee bit of reassurance about that. In terms of Councillor Stewart's point about the NHS and A&E, this is something that we're addressing through existing partnership groups. So I sit, for example, on the suicide prevention group, and we've discussed this very matter over the last couple of meetings about near misses, as you might call it, in A&E, and some of them might actually be prescription drugs or paracetamol, but some of them might well be controlled drugs as well, leading to these situations. And we're working towards a situation where we've got a better kind of information sharing process around that, because the councillor's spot on. We won't necessarily, as a police force, hear about every occasion where somebody requires medical treatment, even if it is for having consumed controlled drugs, and the NHS will quite rightly explain why there are cases where that won't happen, but we're working towards an improved information sharing protocol there. I'm happy to report back on that later if necessary, but that's an ongoing piece of work as part of our partnership work. Councillor MacDonald's point about cyclists with no lights, yes, we see them ourselves, and we hear a lot about them. So there's a general issue there with cycling with no lights, and I'm quite happy to task some enforcement activity around that. There's a specific issue around a particular group of young lads in Stornoway specifically, and we've identified most of them, as the councillor's kind of quite rightly inferring. We don't really get a positive response from them, nor generally from their parents, when we try to deal with them in terms of items like this, which is about their own safety, but also about the kind of antisocial behaviour, low-level antisocial behaviour, vandalism, that kind of thing. But what I'm trying to do just now is get to a situation where we know who all these kids are, and not necessarily trying to prove that they've committed an offence, but actually having direct contact with all their parents to say, you know, firstly, we have a lot of information about your child being responsible for antisocial behaviour, dangerous behaviour in terms of cycling, but also specifically that they're at risk themselves because of their behaviour in terms of cycling at night with no lights on. These parents will get direct contact from me about that, and again, we'll see what kind of response we get from that. But the councillor's right. If they're under 16 and they're committing a minor road traffic offence, yes, we can report them. They're still breaking the law. We can report them, and we will if necessary. I'm not convinced that'll have a particularly strong deterrent effect, but we're quite happy to go down that route.
Thank you very much for these responses, Chief Inspector. If you want to go through with the rest of your report and highlight any of the more significant matters.
Chair.
Sorry, Chief Inspector,
Yeah.
do you want to come in, Councillor Dodson?
Yes, morning, Alistair. I just want to reiterate what Councillor Mackenzie has stated. One of the main complaints that I receive is the speeding and the noise from the vehicles, etc. I'm just wondering, through your speeding and stops, etc., do you collate which is the worst streets or roads in Stornoway, and would it pay really to work with the local authority and advertise that, you know, these are the worst streets, etc., etc.? Because we know that young lads today, once you show yourself on the street, we know that the mobile phones come out and etc., etc. Or watch yourself because the police car is at the top of the road, etc. I'm just wondering, do we collate all that, which is the worst, and would it pay to let the public know which is the worst, etc.? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. We don't collate that. I mean, that it's all on record there as individual incidents. We don't necessarily collate that in terms of establishing any patterns of where the most offences are. It would be easy enough to pull that out. To be honest with you, what the Road Safety Delivery Group do is arrange for surveys through the local authority in particular locations where residents report concerns, and that gives us a more accurate picture over a period of time about where there are particular issues with speeding, what times of the day it's prevalent, that kind of thing. Again, as part of the publicity over this, I'm quite happy to look at where we are seeing the most fixed penalties issued, for example, and including that in the publicity. I don't see that there's anything to be lost by that. That might actually be helpful, so I thank the council for that.
Thank you very much, Chief Inspector. So, is there anything else you would want to add to?
Shall I continue through the report now?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Okay, the next section is acquisitive crime. So that's reducing crime through preventing offending and reducing reoffending in terms of acquisitive crime. I don't propose to say an awful lot in relation to this section. To my mind, we're in a reasonably good position, other than in relation to fraud. We went into this in a bit of detail at the last meeting I spoke at. This continues to be an issue for us, and it continues to be a trend nationally. I've reviewed all our outstanding frauds in the year to date to ensure that there are no opportunities missed for detections. They're often difficult to solve, partly due to the sophistication of the methods used and the geographical spread, and also the limits in the banking system's ability to be able to identify offenders. So we don't have a high detection rate for these. What I am making sure of is that when somebody is targeted, they receive the necessary support and advice to try and ensure, as far as possible, that they don't fall victim again. Police Scotland does regularly highlight some of the more common methods used by criminals in this kind of crime through publicity campaigns, and we've reinforced these locally in the past and used different methods to try and get through to some of the more vulnerable people in the communities. Frustratingly, many people still seem not to be aware of these, and the victims aren't always people with any kind of vulnerability. Some of the common ones appearing locally since my last report include some really straightforward ones, like responding to an online advert to buy an item and being induced to pay in full or deposit by bank transfer, and then the seller disappearing and that money becoming untraceable very quickly. A common one just now is business emails being hacked, and then the perpetrator using knowledge from previous messages in the mailbox to contact another customer or a business purporting to be them, asking for money to be transferred to a particular account for what appear to be genuine reasons, and that's quite a successful method for them, and quite often sees very large amounts of money being lost. And then another one that's appearing really often is the fraudulent message purporting to be from a friend in dire straits, asking for vouchers, usually Amazon vouchers or Google vouchers, to be bought for them, and the voucher number shared. And again, that's usually a result of an email account being hacked, and your web-based email accounts can be hacked if your password isn't strong and if you don't change it regularly, basically. And there's software available to criminals that helps them to try and predict what people's passwords are. So, I mean, that's really just for information and for noting. I think that we really want to do as much as we can to try and educate people not to fall victim to these crimes in the first place. So that's ongoing in terms of our preventions and interventions activity. That's all I would propose to say on acquisitive crime, unless anybody's got any questions.
I don't think so. Chief Inspector, if you just carry on.
Thanks, Chair. I'll move on to antisocial behaviour, violence and disorder. So there's a fair amount of statistics again there in that section of the report, including the stop and search figures there, which I think Councillor McLean was asking about earlier in relation to drugs. But common assaults there, you'll see again is a concerning rise, and the detection rate for violent crime remains high in our command area, which is a good thing, but we want to see the crimes not taking place, obviously, in the first place. So common assaults, meaning assaults that haven't caused a serious injury, that's gone from where are we, 48 to 77, a rise of 29 in the year to date. Thankfully, anything that could be classed as serious violence remains relatively rare, but these figures concern me to the extent that I had an analyst helping looking at the problem to try and identify any patterns which might help explain it. So from a Western Isles perspective, I would say this is a Stornoway issue. All the figures would tend to suggest, as opposed to any kind of hotspots anywhere else in the islands, this is a Stornoway issue. From the analysis, I would say that a summary of the key information is that, okay, so from the period of the 1st of April to 30th of September, the violent crime has increased by 51.5% from the previous year, and also increased by 83.8% from the 5-year average. So what we're seeing there is a marked and probably you would say a sustained increase in low-level violent crime. The vast majority of that's due to common assaults, and there's been an increase in all types of common assaults this year. So common assaults are up, assaults against emergency workers are up, and assaults in a domestic setting are all up fairly significantly on last year. During the current year, the highest proportion of offences have been committed within dwelling houses, That's 53% of offences. This is up. This is also up on previous years, and that's mostly due to an increase in domestic assaults. The second highest location, as you would probably imagine, is public places, on the street, on the road. That accounts for another 33% of violent offences. During the current year, the percentages which included a marker, that means we've a marker on the record to indicate that alcohol, drugs or weapons were involved. 46% included the alcohol marker, 9% included the drugs marker, and 11% included the weapons marker. 12% included a marker indicating that mental health played a part in the incident as well. In terms of hotspots, like I said, this would appear to be a Stornoway issue as opposed to a Western Isles issue, and one single location accounted for 10% of all the violent offences recorded in Stornoway during the current year. In terms of days and times, the only noticeable peak is that which you would probably predict, which is during the early hours of Saturday and Sunday mornings between midnight and 0300. There's other peaks noticeable there, but they're down to generally single incidents with multiple charges. So we're not really counting them in terms of identifying patterns. 32.3% of the offenders were male between 26 and 35. 17.7% were male between 36 and 45. 17.7% were females aged between 16 and 25. And particularly of note, if we take the top 6 offenders during the current year so far, they alone were responsible for 37 common assaults. So there's quite a small group of people there that we can target in terms of intervention to try and reduce their reoffending. So from a police point of view, we're targeting this through a combination of kind of a robust approach to these repeat offenders, use of bail, including curfews, and again, robust enforcement of these bail conditions, and a police presence at licensed premises, and particularly at dispersal periods. And I should say, there's nothing to suggest that there's any issues at any particular licensed premises at this point, but just that peak, as you would expect, at kicking out time on Friday and Saturday night. I think that's all I would say on at this point on the violence side of things, and I'll pause to see if anybody's got a question there.
I don't think anyone's indicating.
No. Okay, so if I move on to the section on protecting vulnerable people, again, you've got an increase in class 2 crimes there from 29 up to 42. That's sexual crimes. That's an increase on 13 year on year. Similarly, your domestic abuse crimes are up from 32 to 44. My perspective on that is we concentrate on providing a professional and a victim-centred approach to these incidents. Domestic abuse situations, those which are deemed to be high risk, continue to be dealt with on a multi-agency basis through the MARAC arrangements, the multi-agency risk assessment conferences. We put in place perpetrator management plans around repeat or serious domestic abusers, and we robustly enforce the conditions around these, and we take every opportunity to disrupt their activities. We take a preventative approach where possible, for example, through the Violence Against Women Partnership and the work ongoing in that partnership. And another example would be the work that we're doing through the Child Protection Committee at the moment in partnership with NSPCC, which is about preventing child sexual abuse. So these numbers are up, and that's never good, but it gives me a degree of confidence that people are happy to report these things and have confidence in the police and the other support services to actually deal with them appropriately. That's really it for anything I would propose to highlight from my report. I think the rest speaks for itself. The only other thing I wanted to mention really was because I think there was a degree of engagement with the local authority from senior officers about COP26, how we were going to manage that, and the effect it was likely to have on local policing. So by way of a very, very brief update on that, we had five officers from the Western Isles deployed in various roles to COP26 for some or all of the period of the conference. The way we managed that abstraction locally was basically through overtime, so it was an expensive exercise, but it was funded centrally. We used officers on rest day overtime to fill gaps, basically. So we didn't see a reduction in staffing in the Western Isles during that period, and we've now got everybody back. From a national perspective, you'll have seen it was deemed to have been a successful policing operation. So we're reasonably content with that. That's really all I would propose to say. I'm quite happy to take any further questions.
Thank you very much, Chief Inspector. I suppose we should remind ourselves that crime is there. It is likely to be there in low numbers, but we live in a community where we're blessed with really relatively low crime rates and antisocial behaviour, although any incident is of concern to those that are affected, of course. But thank you for that report. I think I see, I'm not sure who's, Councillor Callum McMillan, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yep, yeah, coming through loud and clear.
Yes, it was just I was intrigued with the Chief Inspector's star customers, making up very good statistics there. So it's at least they know who the customers are. The other one, which I was looking at, there's two actually. They're connected. The one with the NHS not contacting the police in the event of overdoses, I think that should continue so that people aren't afraid to call in any health issues that arise from their activities in case they get caught or into trouble. And I think that the safety of the person who is in trouble is overrides the police statistics, so that these people get urgent care without any hesitation that it might cause them to get into trouble if they're involved as well. So that's my view on that. But the other one was to do with the Chief Inspector had a phrase that the benzene. I take it that's what were called Tazzies or something back in the day. Is that problem with young people, or is it for people who ought to know better, who have grown old but not grown up? Is that part of the statistics? Is it part of the opiate crisis, as we're calling it, which is an older person problem rather than youngsters who do whatever youngsters do? That's my curious. Is the benzo somethings, is that linked with older people, or is that part of the younger generation? Just if that could be looked at. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chief Inspector.
Thank you very much for your comments and question, Councillor McMillan. Chief Inspector, do you want to reply?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. The issue about the A&E, I should probably clarify. I mean, obviously, medical confidentiality is paramount in these kind of situations, and where we're talking particularly is around children and young people, and where there might be wider kind of protective issues around them, as well as just the drugs side of it. So there's probably a bit of room for discussion about protocols around information sharing around children and young people, whereas, you know, there's no question that somebody turning out to for treatment at A&E should be worried about the police being informed about you know, the fact that they've received treatment for a particular reason. I should really have clarified that. In terms of the benzodiazepines, the pattern seems to be, as I said, they're implicated in well over half of all drugs deaths now in conjunction usually with opiates. My own impression from what I see locally and what I read nationally is that the people who are taking benzodiazepines are problem drug users already. I don't see much evidence of them being used recreationally. It just seems to be a trend with people who are problem drug users who use multiple commodities at the same time. And sometimes it's alcohol and benzodiazepines. So I should say that as well, not just necessarily opiates or cocaine or anything else. So it doesn't really answer your question because it's not confined to a particular age group, but I would say generally it's problem drug users. I don't know if that provides any clarity.
Thank you very much, Chief Inspector. I think we all recognise the dilemma where law enforcement and medical care may have a bit of a heads-on there, but I think we would all wish young people and people who are in difficulty to have open and free access to medical care in these urgent and emergency circumstances without fear of consequences. In the first instance, the last thing we would want to see is a death because somebody has not taken their friend or taken themselves to urgent medical care when it's needed. So thank you for that. I think I see John Mitchell at the back.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, John Mitchell, Harris and South Lochs. Morning, Chief Inspector, and thanks for your very comprehensive report. Could I just bring up a point about cold calling and fraud? You know, there is quite a bit of evidence that in Harris, certain elderly people have been targeted and have lost significant monies. Now, I know PC Fraser has been fairly proactive in that area and has reported to various organisations in Harris and South Lochs. Do we have any statistics on how that situation is and how it's progressing, hopefully getting better and so on? Could you supply some information on that? Thank you.
I can't give you a breakdown at the moment, Councillor, about to that degree of where the crimes are within the Western Isles. It's something I could probably draw out and provide for you off table. In terms of how it's progressing, I think kind of I said when I was speaking about the cybercrime side of things, and I would include the cold calling scams in a similar vein, because it's also fraud. It's an increasing problem nationally. I do feel that to a degree we're disproportionately affected by that in rural areas, and I'm not quite sure why that is. Possibly we rely more on doing financial transactions online, and possibly we've got an older population, and more of a proportion of our population might be vulnerable to falling for scams, cold calls, that kind of thing. So I can't give any reassurance that it's an improving picture, is the honest answer there. The only thing I can do is provide reassurance again that each individual case is scrutinised very closely, and anybody with any kind of vulnerabilities, we are sharing that information and seeking support from families or other services to provide support for them, and we will continue to engage in campaigns to try and raise awareness about these scams.
Thank you very much, Chief Inspector. I think we've got two more, and we'll make these the last two. I think Councillor Cal McMillan first, and then Councillor Norm MacDonald Skidderoo. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, it's just an observation on scams. So if I've sent you an email looking for Google Gifts, I would have to know what Google Gifts were first of all. And it's old emails or old email addresses do have a value. And when they get sold on by the service providers, then there's a transactional amount for the sale of old email addresses because of the contacts, which I didn't know. So once I find out what a Google gift is, I'll be grateful for the gift. But the other one was still to do with the drugs and my ignorance and the whole thing. The diazepams, are they manufactured by the likes of the big companies? Because my drugs come from Belhaven and they are regulated and of a certain quality. Is it the quality problem that is causing the overdoses, or is it simply user misuse? And would regulation, because if these are essentially addicts who have moved on from glue or whatever it was in the 80s, would that benefit from being regulated and available? Because they're not going to stop. They would. Stopping is not an option, I think, for a lot of these people. Would it be part of a controlled supply through medical quality drugs? Would that resolve the problem of overdosing, or is it a quality problem or a quantity problem? I think that's what I'd like to know your opinion or your expertise on that, just from my own knowledge, and because we're not going to solve the current issue, but if we might be able to make ourselves aware to try and avert drug deaths in the future, that's my concern. So if you could give us your knowledge and expertise on that, I'd be very grateful. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor McMillan. I'm sure there could be a very long, detailed response to that, but I think if you just want to make a quick comment back to Councillor McMillan on that, I think it's possibly one for a much wider forum and political decision making and everything else to fully address Councillor McMillan's question. But if you want to just give a quick response.
Very briefly, I don't claim any expertise in this specifically, but these are drugs that are available on prescription. But what we see seized are often not drugs that are manufactured officially, but street drugs that have been manufactured in a back street or whatever. So one of the issues is that people who are taking them don't know what the strength of them is, how consistent it is. It's not really, I suppose, a harm reduction debate in as much as these are drugs that can be prescribed. You know, it's not like heroin or cocaine. If somebody goes to their GP and their GP assesses that they need benzodiazepines, they'll get a prescription for it. So it's a slightly different debate. But yeah, you're right. It's part of the issue nationally is that people don't know how strong the drugs are that they're taking because they're not officially manufactured.
Thank you very much, Chief Inspector. I think the advice there is to stick to your Belhaven dispensary and follow the prescribed amount of drugs to take there. Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks again, Chair. Nora MacDonald Skirrow. I'm not a member of your committee. I was lucky enough when I worked in a previous employment to be heading up a team dealing with spammers and scammers and copyright infringement, etc., etc. So I was lucky enough to be informed about scamming, etc. I'm going to make a sweeping statement here, a generalisation that it's probably a generation slightly ahead of ourselves that are proportionately more affected by cold collars and getting caught out with this. I know because my own mother was affected. She was caught out in this scam. People phoning up and offering to protect her from spam callers, funnily enough, and offering to sell her a call blocker. Now, the company involved, several companies involved, all originated in the same area in Bournemouth. I reported this to Dorset Police. I reported it to, what do you call the crime programme on BBC? Crime Watch, whatever it was. I reported to them. I heard nothing back. I tracked them down. They've changed their names from Call Guardian, Guardian Protect, Call Protect, United something or other. 8 different names. The guy in charge of the company was prosecuted, fined £500,000, was back operating again within the month. So it's difficult to nail them down. It's very difficult to nail these people down. But what I would suggest is that in conjunction with the police and possibly our own citizens' advice, that people who have elderly parents who are in the house on their own, possibly getting bombarded with phone calls that they will not be aware of, if they see anything like a suspicious box or packages, because they started accumulating in my mother's house call blockers, purportedly call blockers. Now, before I knew where my mother was, she'd signed up to several of these schemes, taking £150 a month out of their account, handing over her card details, being assured that, you know, she had to pay this, that the next thing. So if you have elderly parents, or if anybody has elderly parents, and they start to see a suspicious package arriving and asking what it is, you know, to check the bank accounts right away, because the money will not just trickle out, it'll flood out of these accounts. My mother got scammed for about £4,000 or £5,000 before I realised what was going on. So it's incumbent upon people who have elderly parents to watch out for this kind of scam, because you just never know what your mother or your father has given their credit card or their debit card details over on the phone and unwittingly signed up to something where a significant amount of money each month was coming out of their account. So I think maybe with conjunction with the police and with citizens' advice, maybe we could publicise the fact there are certain things that you need to look out for, because it's a devastating effect on families, because it's a lot of money and it can happen very quickly, and the chances of recovering any of it is slim.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald. I entirely agree with all you say there, and I wouldn't necessarily assume that it's just the elderly that can succumb to this. That these people are extremely clever. They know how to tap into our vulnerabilities and our insecurities, and many people who you would think would be IT savvy and savvy about the ways of the world have been scammed as well. So yes, I think a timely reminder really just for that. Sadly, it does take place, and these people don't need to have a base in this country. They can come from anywhere, of course, throughout the world with the open networks that we have. Yeah. I said it was the last, but Vice Chair, I'll just let one more.
Thank you. Just to tell Councillor MacDonald that a lot of suspicious-looking parcels coming into my house, but they've got Amazon on them. I don't know. I would like to ask the Chief Inspector what the relationship with schools is. You know, I'm talking about the drug situation, and in particular the one that's beside us here, because it's the biggest school, the biggest secondary school.
Chief Inspector, do you want to come in?
Apologies. Is that Councillor Mackenzie? I couldn't see who was.
That's Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you. Are you asking specifically how we work in partnership with the Nicholson, what the mechanics of that are? I mean, I think we've got, on a kind of ground level, day to day, each school has got a police officer allocated to it. They're all the response officers across the islands are allocated schools. Face-to-face contact has been minimal due to COVID restrictions over the last 18 months or so, but these relationships remain. These are things that I'm keen to develop as far as possible, so that there's an informal relationship between staff at every school and a local police officer. We've always had that. It just comes and goes in terms of sometimes the door is open, sometimes we've got less time to engage in that. But in terms of like partnership working, then the education department are obviously represented on the various thematic groups under, for example, the Child Protection Committee, the Adult Protection Committee, and that's how we feed in from a kind of strategic level, I suppose, into what's happening day to day in the schools and the other services. I could talk for a long time again about how that works and where it works well and where it could work better. But these relationships are in place, and drugs is one of the things that gets covered in these discussions, and as part of these discussions, plans are formulated and work is carried out. I don't know if I need to be any more specific than that, or if the councillor wants to hear a wee bit more detail.
No, that's fine just now. It's just that there should be a relationship there.
Thank you very much, Chief Inspector. I think that concludes. I think the level of interest from the committee and from others just highlights the interest and concerns we have, and the support that we have for our police. And we wish you and your colleagues well over the period ahead, and trust that there'll be no undue incidents that cause any difficulty. But I think certainly the highlighting of some of the issues that you've raised today in the media with our own press and with your own outlets as well would do no harm at all. So thank you very much for that, Chief Inspector. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda. It is fuel poverty update report by Director for Communities. At this stage, I would welcome Stuart Wilson, Chief Executive, and Donald McKinnon, Deputy Director from Taoiseach Gowell, who are in attendance through Teams. The report is there for noting on our agenda and provides an update on a number of current issues relating to fuel poverty. Ian Wilson will speak to the report, and officers from Teague will then provide a short presentation to the committee. Mr. Wilson.
Thanks.
Watson, even.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members. Good morning, officers. Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've got a report before you just now that touches upon a couple of issues relating to fuel poverty. And you may recall at the last meeting of the committee, we had a very brief discussion about air source heat pumps. So we've included that in the report and the presentation as well. The two main issues I set out in the report are, first of all, a recent removal of public subsidy or grant for all oil and liquid petroleum gas heating systems, and also the introduction of a new quality standard for aspects of insulation work that's required on private housing. So the report's divided into two main parts. First of all, looking at the boilers issue, and secondly, the new quality standard. And our colleagues from Teague will pick up on that in their presentation after I finish going through the report. In terms of the changes to boilers, this arose from a decision taken by the Scottish Government back in September to immediately end the availability of public subsidy or grants for all oil and LPG heating systems. Now, this obviously doesn't directly affect the Comhairle because our HEAP scheme that you'll be aware of doesn't deal in heating systems. It's primarily around insulation on owner-occupied properties, but it still could have an impact on other schemes like that delivered through Home Energy Scotland. So up until this decision, which was taken quite abruptly, and it led from the discussions the SNP and the Green Party had on working together, and this was announced towards the end of September this year, but the immediate cease to grant being available for these schemes. So it will have an impact on some of the national schemes that are in operation, although we understand from Warm Home Scotland, they were already focusing very much on air source heat pumps and electrical systems. when they assessed properties on the island. The report also, for information, sets out a breakdown of the different heating types in the island at the moment, and you can see that at section 6.10 of the report. You'll see that oil heating systems is by far the most common in the Outer Hebrides at the moment. The use of air source heat pumps, again, our colleagues from TIG will look at that in a wee bit more detail shortly, but 6.12 of the report sets out some issues that should be considered when considering installing an air source heat pump into a property. The second item that we wanted to bring to your attention is in relation to the new quality standard for insulation works. It's called the PASS system, the Public Available Specification. This system's been in place for a number of years, but there are some changes brought in recently that are going to make it more challenging for firms and organisations to meet that particular standard. The new system introduces new roles in the process. Before, the standard would apply to the system being fitted, but now there's a requirement for different aspects of the process to have certification. So, for example, staff who are involved in the process will now require certification if they're performing different roles, like a retrofit advisor, an assessor, a coordinator, a designer, an evaluator. So, a lot more to take on board when delivering installation works on properties. So it's also going to require a fair amount of retraining for people involved in the process, and obviously there's a cost involved in this as well, which could be particularly challenging for smaller firms and particularly challenging for rural areas. One of the issues is a lack of training centres in Scotland, and again our colleagues in TIG will pick up on that shortly. So it has been a fair bit of concern for ourselves and TIG in terms of the HEAPS programme that we deliver on behalf of the Scottish Government. We have had a very useful meeting with senior officials from the Scottish Government that took place yesterday about the implications for the PAS system. And again, our colleagues from TIG will possibly pick up on that. So work is underway to try and see what we can do to address that particular issue. And we'll certainly feed back to committee once we have more information about these discussions that are ongoing at the moment. Same in regard to the change from oil heating systems as well. Members will probably be aware that the Scottish Government's view is that we should be moving away from the systems that produce a great deal of carbon, and that's part of the heat to building strategy, which members may recall we responded to the consultation on that earlier this year. And there's also a newly released fuel poverty strategy being just published by the Scottish Government that makes reference to moving away from these things as well. So the bigger picture, I think we can see the sense in doing that, but I think the concern we have at the immediate stage is the way this change came in very abruptly without any lead-in times for the council and for all councils to take account of this. So that's a very quick summary of the two issues in regard to the move away from oil and liquid petroleum gas heating and the potential greater role that air source heat pumps will have in heating the households in the Outer Hebrides. And the second area, the change to the standard for insulation works, which will have an implication on our own HEAPS programme. So that's all I have to say at the moment, Chairman. I'll pass over to our colleagues from TIG now. I believe that the copies of the PowerPoint presentation they've got have been circulated to members already, so that they should be available for members to look at during their presentation.
Thank you very much, Ian. Just before we lead off with our colleagues from TIG, I just wonder if members have any observations or questions on the report itself. You will recall we had some discussions about the matters as you've outlined, the haste with which this has been introduced, and within the report, the fact that there was no island impact assessment undertaken, as far as we know, on this prior to the introduction. In my own view, I think it would have a disproportionate effect on island communities with our heavy reliance on oil heating systems, LPG, and in the report at 6.10, when you say gas, I mean, I assume that's another LPG in the form of the gas in the Stornoway area. So that system would also be affected by the change in emphasis from government. So I think we all recognise that we do need to move away from fossil fuels, and but when there's a disproportionate effect and a difficulty in meeting these in an island context, I think it's important that the government fulfills its obligation to undertake these impact assessments to ensure that there isn't a disproportionate impact and that there is sufficient mitigation introduced by way of support to communities. And possibly a degree of derogation might be helpful to allow that to be built up. So I think there could be some difficulties for people who have these established systems in their homes, and particularly with the older concrete stone houses and the smaller radiators that have been installed in these houses over the years. So I do share and agree with the concerns highlighted in the report, and possibly it might be appropriate to make some representation to government, seeking some, I think, greater period of derogation to comply with this, and to continue to extend the support to these extant heating systems that are so prevalent throughout our islands. I see colleagues wanting to come in with a number of questions. Keith first, and then Councillor McLean, and then Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to confirm with the officer. At the moment, my understanding is if my boiler breaks down, I cannot now get an assisted or a loan, etc., or help to replace it with another boiler that's been stopped. Now, will I be able to get a grant or help if I go to these heat pumps, etc., etc.? Because I can see there's a lot of people on this island that if they do get a boiler breakdown, they're not going to be able to afford having a new heat pump, etc., put in. And when I read here an £100,000 allocated to the islands to help out, that's just a drop in the ocean, really. And I think this is going to be a lot of hardship. And I think it's coming far too early to help out elderly people. If that's my understanding of it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dodds. It may be that our colleagues from TIG might have some of the answer to some of the questions that you may have in mind. I don't know, Mr. Watson, if would it be that be the case for that particular?
Yes, it might be useful to wait till the presentation has been delivered.
If you're okay with that, Councillor Dodds, and our colleagues in TIG will address that I think, in that presentation. Councillor McLean.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ian, for that report. It's quite enlightening. I don't want to preempt what TIG have got, as you rightly say, Chair, because probably that's to do with some of the questions I would raise, because I did raise, firstly, the problems I see with this inordinate haste to go to air source heating from a government that is totally out of touch with the poverty issues, particularly in our islands. I do think that this is going to hit, as already been alluded to, the most vulnerable in our communities, because these are the ones that are going to. You've already mentioned it, Chair, today, that these are the ones that are going to be affected severely, and it's not just a little bit; it's severely affected by this, what I would call an inordinate haste in going down this road, to a road that is, as yet, it is still questionable as to the economics, because this I was looking at greenmatch.co.uk, and they have actually they're all for this new green technology, but they do highlight there is upfront costs that are huge, there is questionable sustainability, and the other thing that they do, the issues in cold weather. Now, let's be quite honest with you, our climate doesn't give itself over to giving heat pumps because of the outside temperatures. If you look at the temperatures that we have at the moment, they're down to 3-4 degrees, and there is a questionable, and maybe I'll take this with Teague, as to whether these heat pumps, these air source heat pumps, are in effect efficient. Because some of them, I say, when it goes down to in cold weather, are not able to go above 18 degrees. Now you think of that with an old woman of 70 or 80 years of age, or 90 years of age, that they're not able to heat their homes. And above everything else, there's the whole business of how they actually operate and the costs that involves. But the other one that I would think is, you mentioned two, Ian, they are that in 6-7, two government bodies, which I would say that they are Home Energy Scotland and Warmworks. Warmworks is actually a managing agent of Scottish government. They are bound to put out what the Scottish government and within their coalition with Greens want us to do. So they'll be actually pushing for this rather than pushing for anything else or even a slowdown. So I have really great concerns about the haste in which this is going on.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacLean. And as you say, maybe allow an opportunity to come back after we hear from our colleagues. Councillor McCormack first, and then I think we'll introduce the presentation.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. This is, I 100% agree with Councillor Callum MacLean in regard to his reference to the likely effect this is going to have on poverty in the Outer Hebrides. It's likely to have a very deleterious effect, and I'm very concerned about that indeed. The situation as far as poverty in our islands is concerned is quite serious as it is. We don't want it to be enhanced in any way. I was very struck with the list at 610, where there is an indication that 109 homes in the Outer Hebrides have no heating. That's pretty worrying. It's certainly very worrying if they are inhabited. I share Councillor MacLean's concerns about heat pumps. I would have to say that this particular issue is something that a great many people have spoken to me about since the government's announcement. It's worrying people. It's particularly worrying people of my kind of age group who are very, very concerned about the possibility that they might have to change from oil. And they certainly don't want to do that anytime soon. And the other thing, of course, that is troubling them is how on earth are they going to change? Where are they going to find the resource to change the system, a heating system in their homes? They're very concerned about that indeed. And I think that as a council, we should be indicating to the Scottish government that to do this kind of thing in any kind of short-term way would be very, very wrong indeed, and that this change, say, to electricity should take place over a long period of time. I would like that to happen. Electric heating in homes is good. It works very effectively and efficiently, except when a storm comes along and knocks down the poles. And then we've really got issues as they have over in Aberdeenshire at the moment. However, that said, any heating system can have problems of that nature. My own feeling is that one thing that we might do in terms of reducing costs for everybody in the islands is to pursue with SSE the reduction of the cost of electricity. We're all affected by the cost of electricity. And as you know, we are currently paying here in the islands over a penny per unit more than in, say, the Central Belt. Were that to be changed, it would make a significant difference to everybody in the Outer Hebrides, and it would make people more inclined perhaps to move to electricity as a way of heating their homes. But it has to take time. It cannot be done in a rush. That's just foolishness. And there are a great many people in our community who are very, very concerned about this idea that something like this is going to change so readily. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Appley. Unless anyone has got a direct question for Mr. Watson on the report, and if you have questions that emerge during the course of the presentation, we'll certainly allow an opportunity for questions after that. So, can I ask,
Chairman?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Chair.
Can I, Ray McKenzie, Stornoway South. Yeah, can I ask before the presentation, which maybe a lot of questions hopefully will be answered. Could I ask Mr. Watson, I didn't quite catch what he said about the meeting yesterday and what scope we're going to have. I'm thinking of the islands deal, for instance, and what scope there is in that or similar arrangements for the islands. Because the report actually says that we're at 40% fuel poverty, and we know that there's the 3 criteria involved, and that doesn't seem to have changed at all, no matter what bodies or whatever we do over the last few years. So we're not making progress on that. So as has been said, you know, there's a strong possibility that this might get worse before it gets better. So what was the encouragement that was given yesterday, if any?
Thank you very much, Councillor McKenzie. Do you want to just give a quick reply to that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, the meeting yesterday was specifically about the new quality standard, the PASS system, and we had a meeting with the senior officials who we deal with for the HEAPS programme. So it didn't touch on the heating system element of it, but like I said, it was a very constructive meeting, and the officials are looking into the situation in regard to the PASS. Just very briefly, in terms of the island deal, members may recall there is a proposal, or part of the proposal is setting up the Island Centre for Zero Carbon, which will look at aspects of fuel poverty as well. So that's, as members will be aware, in development at the moment, and no doubt there'll be updates provided as that progresses over the life of the island deal. The island deal. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Ian. I think if we move now to the presentation, and there may be, is it direct, Councillor MacDonald, to Mr. Watson just now, a general question that maybe we...
Well, yes, I think, Ian, I think Mr. Watson might be the man to answer this question, and it's not directly related to fuel poverty, but it is indirectly related to fuel poverty. And if anybody has the answer, I'm sure Mr. Watson will. New legislation is making people put new fire smoke alarms detection systems into their houses. I think it becomes in effect next February.
Well, we've got an item on that later on the agenda.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, then. I don't know if is it Stuart or is it Donald that's coming in from TIG with the presentation? If you'd like to come in now. Donald.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you on this very important issue that we're discussing this morning. First of all, it is with a sense of fear and trepidation that I do speak to you on air source heat pumps, because in TIG we have a vast experience gained over the number of years delivering heating systems which primarily in the island, as you will know, have been oil, electric and gas. We do not have a great experience of installing air source heat pumps. I think the local resource that would give you a far greater insight into that than we can is HHP. Obviously, they install that. Although, having said that, we must remember that that is a new build, which is completely different to the situation that we're considering here today of retrofitting air source heat pumps. We have distributed a PowerPoint presentation. I'm not sure, does that come up on the screen or do you see it on your own screens? We've just, for the purposes of
Can I just pause just a moment, Mr. McKinnon, just to see if have we got that PowerPoint?
I can see if we can get that PowerPoint shared on the screen, and then
through it ourselves.
If we just take a couple of minutes.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Was it on? Oh, it's up now.
I'm seeing it now. Yeah. Okay, so
Okay, carry on.
we didn't want to do death by PowerPoint, as it were. I didn't want to do a lot of slides. This is really a summary of the issues. So as you can see there, air source heat pumps, how effective, we need to understand they can be excellent. But like any system, they do need to be carefully considered, and the install issues need to be understood. These are some of the issues that immediately come to the fore, and already some of the councillors have raised this in the discussion that's taken place so far. There in the first bullet point there, you can see where we're referring to air source heat pumps do require bigger radiators and a greater radiator surface because they work at a cooler flow temperature than the traditional oil and gas heating systems that have been installed in island properties. One of the real concerns that we have been made aware of quite early is people who have received air source heat pumps through the Warmer Home Scotland programme and live in social housing properties that they've purchased. Because they do not generally have large wall space, some of these properties, in order to get the correct temperatures for the rooms, have had to have installed triple panel radiators, which encroach into the room quite considerably and aesthetically are not nice to look at. So that's just one of the issues in the passing. Somebody else made reference to the fact that air source heat pumps are complicated. They are very, very complicated. They can be complicated to understand, to use. It's not a simple case of going to a set of controls on a wall where you're able to push a button and switch a boiler on and switch it off on and off as you want and control it with thermostatic radiator valves and a wall stat. It's much more complex than that. And again, as somebody has raised, I think it was Councillor McLean who raised the issue about the outside air temperature. That again is an issue for ourselves as we consider our own setting here in the island. And if we think of last Friday, for instance, I think the performance of an air source heat pump would have been greatly reduced given the wind chill effect of the 50-mile-an-hour winds that we experienced last Friday from due north. So that is an issue. If we can go to the next slide, please. So all we've done, and we've only done 2 slides on air source heat pumps because, the reason for that will become apparent in a minute, because actually the real issue with air source heat pumps is not air source heat pumps, and I'm going to come on to that in a minute. Some areas to be considered, installing air source heat pumps in uninsulated and drafty homes can be counterproductive, as has already been discussed, and that is the real issue I'm going to talk to in a minute. Usability, again, the householders need to understand that if they are coming off an oil-fired system onto an air source system, they are not going to get the significant heat that you can get off an oil-fired system, or particularly a gas-fired system that can give radiators up to full, a heating system up to full working temperature in a matter of 5 to 10 minutes if it's a gas system. One of the things that we do get contacted quite regularly in TIG is people asking us if we're able to give them advice on how to reset their units after there has been a power cut. And what seems to happen there is that there is a connection between the internal unit and the external unit, and after a power outage, that connection is lost and sometimes is quite complex and complicated to understand how that connection is restored. Stuart himself attended a property for a friend a few weeks ago, and he struggled to understand how to do it. And after much deliberation and consulting the documentation, he was able to do it, but he said he found it difficult. And he said, thinking of an elderly person trying to do that, he said, I just can't imagine how anybody would ever have been able to do that. Maintenance, just a point in the passing that people may not be aware of. I've raised this with several people. Air source heat pumps need serviced, just as do oil boilers and gas boilers, to maintain optimum performance. So an air source heat pump needs to be serviced every year. I checked this morning with one of our local suppliers who are MCS registered, the accreditation required to fit air source heat pumps, and they have a standard charge of £95, which is what they would have charged for an oil system as well. But it is something to keep in mind. In the discussion, capital cost is relatively high. We are talking somewhere in the region of £12,000 to £15,000 to install an air source heat pump. And warranties and contracts need to be fair. So these are some of the main sort of issues around air source heat pumps. But I do want to move on to the next slide, please. Because this is really the key issue affecting not just the insulation programme that we deliver on your behalf. TIGA, the managing agents for delivering the Home Energy Efficiency Programme Scotland area-based scheme on behalf of CNES, and that programme right now is experiencing significant and serious issues that as yet are unresolved, not peculiar to TIG, not peculiar to the Western Isles, not peculiar to Scotland. It is an issue that is affecting the whole of the insulation industry right across the UK as a result of the introduction of this new PAS standard. So the publicly available standard, the two that affect us is PAS 2035 2019 and PAS 2030 2019. These were introduced in May-June 2020, and they became applicable to us delivering programmes for yourselves, the HEAPS programme, from the 1st of September onwards. So all the work that we do from 1st of September has to comply with PAS. Now, it's not just applicable to the HEAPS ABS programme. Warmer Homes Scotland will have to comply with this from March the 1st, 2022. So the whole of the central heating programme, the Warmer Homes Scotland programme, they will have to comply with this. So all heating systems that they install will have to comply with the standards of this new insulation standards that we're looking at today. And it's not even just that, it's all programmes. Whatever we do, whatever programme we try and do, everything now has to comply. So, for instance, we have been for the last number of years using funding to deliver heating upgrades to people in the islands, across the islands, who have an active cancer diagnosis. That scheme is now currently at a standstill because it has to comply with this ventilation standard. So I'll get on to the ventilation standards and I'll run through it quickly. And I think once you have this as a backdrop to air source heat pumps, you'll see that if you think air source heat pumps is a big issue, then I think this is an even bigger issue. So with the introduction of this new standard, we were required to introduce new rules, to appoint people to comply with these new rules to the domestic retrofit process. And I don't think I'll stay on this slide. I think I'll go to the next one, please. So the key issues arising from the PAS, and really these are the key issues that are going to seriously implement what we're looking at today about air source heat pumps. First of all, as you've discussed with oil and gas, the whole industry right across Britain have very recently responded to a consultation which was carried out by our industry body, the National Insulation Association, and to a man, everybody has said that the transition time here is far too short. It's extremely confusing. It's costly. There's been no understanding around the process. There is a significant issue with the requirement for training, but the non-availability of the training that we're required to do. And then there are new supply accreditations required. So the people who wrote the PAS wrote it, and one of the key drivers in this new PAS is trying to tackle the issue of badly installed work and we're aware of that locally, and it's nationally. It's a big issue, and the people who wrote the PAS did it to move away from a competency-based skill base to a qualification-based skill set. And whilst we can understand what they were trying to achieve there, the way they're going about it is very, very, very restrictive on the delivery of the programme. So let me try and illustrate that for you just now. We have joiners working for TIG who have been installing internal wall insulation and room and roof insulation for us for the last 7, 8 years. Some of these guys have been on the tools 20, 25, 30 years. And in terms of the skill required to install internal wall insulation and room and roof insulation, it's not exactly taxing on their abilities. But what the PAS has now turned around and said, we no longer recognise these people as competent. So previously, these people were allowed to work because they came through on what was called RPL, recognised prior learning. They recognised that these guys had been on the tools, they'd had the skills, they were all able to do it, they had served their time. Now, in order to work on the new PAS, everybody working on it needs to have an NVQ level 2 in insulation and building treatments. And this is a course which is supposed to be available. It's not available yet, but we're supposed to have this in place, and the supply chain needs to attain this qualification. To do that, it requires 150 hours of online training over a period of 6 to 9 months, combined with on-site online live audits. And it's a significant undertaking. And the galling thing about it is, at the end of it all, the joiner of 25 years who has been doing room and roof insulation and internal wall insulation, having completed this training, having obtained this qualification, will not be doing anything differently. Not a thing. Nothing whatsoever. He will carry on, he will come back to work, and he will continue. And that's the galling thing for us. The pressure that that's putting on the supply chain. And it immediately has presented the issue of when we go to people who are working for us, they immediately are indicating their unwillingness to engage with something that is so onerous on their time, and onerous obviously on the time they have to take out from work if they're self-employed or if they're employed. Regardless, there is a time element in attaining an accreditation that doesn't in any way benefit. So I'm sorry to ramble on, but that is a significant issue. There is the front-end customer liaison, the property surveying, the proposed retrofit plan. I'll come back to that one in a minute. I'm just looking at the slide. I think the bottom one, oh, the second bottom one, sorry, because this is the one where really this is now the issue, because the new standard demands that we meet new ventilation standards. And this is where everything, and this is what has caused the whole industry UK-wide to come to a standstill. So previously, we did not have these standards. Now, new ventilation standards are in the PAS 2030-2019. So what does it mean? If you live, well, obviously, first of all, we are talking about doing internal wall insulation. Internal wall insulation is only done on properties with solid wall. So take, for instance, a property that we can all envisage in our minds, the 1.5-storey croft house that are found dominating many, many villages throughout the islands from the Bud to Barra. Typical house. We have to go to that house now. In order to comply, we now have to introduce these new ventilation standards, which mean we have to drill, core the wall in the kitchen, the bathroom, the utility, the ensuite, any room such as that with a permanent fixed vent drilled through the wall. So there's the first issue. What's the wall type? Well, the wall type is quite often Louisian gneiss stone, which, as we all know, is one of the hardest geological stones in the world. We have spoken to people and we are yet to find out if there is locally available drills that will actually core this, and if they do, how long do they last? Just as an aside, our care and repair project recently did an adaptation in Bernera in a solid wall house where there was a requirement to go through the wall, a stone property, rather than core it. They simply took the stone out, which took a whole day. So along with the need for permanent fixed vents, we also then are required to fit trickle vents in the windows in every habitable room. So living room, bedrooms, so on, we now are required to fit a trickle vent 1.2 meters long. I don't know if you'll be able to see this on the camera, but that is 1.2 meters long. I don't know if you're able to see that. That is practically impossible to do, because we've been in discussion with local window manufacturers who first of all tell us that all windows over 600 millimeters have a metal frame built into the window. So it's not just a case of cutting through plastic, we're going to be cutting through metal, and there's all issues regarding the effect of that on the overall strength of the window. And the most bizarre one of all is that we have to cut 10 millimeters off the underside of every single door in the property to enable airflow from the vents, and all of this to eradicate dampness. That's the rationale for this, and we've been doing internal wall insulation for the last 7-8 years across the islands, and as yet nobody has ever come to us and said, you've done IWI in our property, we have dampness. And the reason for that, quite simply, is that we believe that there is significant air changes within properties, because a lot of our properties here are leaky properties. You'll get air changes coming up through floors, coming through walls, coming through various sources. So that is right now what has virtually paralysed the insulation industry. Locally, we have not done a single install on the 21-22 heaps programme as a result of this. We have been in discussion with industry bodies, with utilities, with the Scottish Government. Ian made reference to the discussion we had yesterday with Ed Chapman. And whilst that is encouraging in that they themselves now realise and recognise that there cannot be a generic approach by a standard such as this without allowing the geographical factor to come into play, because there's a vast difference in the air change in a property in Berwick and Tweed and Ballintrishall. The property in Ballintrishall last Friday would have had significant air changes. And if you introduce this ventilation into a property, we now have significant questions, and we raised this, and it seems we were amongst the first people to raise this particular concern. If anybody was ever to agree with this, and coming back to one of the earlier points in the slide where it spoke about front-end customer liaison, this is a concern where even if we do get to the stage where all this is finally agreed, I cannot see for the life of me that people in the island are going to be wanting to have this installed in their homes. And particularly when they come to where we have had initial discussions with people, when they hear the requirement for door undercuts, they're just looking at us as if we've suddenly gone mad or something, that we're suggesting this. But our concern about the whole thing is, what is the effect of this on thermostatic radiator valves, on room stats, where previously thermostatic radiator valves would switch a radiator off because the room had gone up to temperature, And again, a wall start would switch off. But now, with this new ventilation standards and the amount of airflow that you're going to have going through a property, we can quite easily see where people may be going into poverty because of this, because the heating system will not be able to reach the temperature that previously it was setting off. I can quite easily see boilers that would have gone off in an hour, having done the heating cycle and taken the house up to 23 degrees in the sitting room and 18 degrees elsewhere, now being able to attain that because there is a constant air change in the property. So is there there's no other slide after this, I don't think. I think, yeah, our key responses for this. So coming back to the training issue for the supply chain, we have tried every way, and we are continuing to try to get off the runway with this one. We have signed an MOU with Edinburgh College for the supply chain. At that time, we had about a dozen local installers for doing room and roof and internal wall insulation. Sadly, some of them have left us because they have been offered greater earnings and been offered far greater wages than they can make here through some of the big schemes that have been delivered in the island just now. So we've lost quite a bit of our supply chain. But the training within Edinburgh College, we've signed up for it, but it's not yet available. It hasn't yet been decided. And then, of course, as you can see there, there's the hurdles, there's the cost of the time. We have trained our staff to the new standards that are required. So to deliver this new PAS, we now need a retrofit coordinator. We have one of these. We have retrofit assessors. They've been trained. We have gone on all the courses to attain all the ventilation certifications, so on and so forth. And yeah, that is where we are right now. I know we're talking about air source heat pumps, but there's a far, far greater issue than air source heat pumps. If we are going to start installing air source heat pumps into the properties in the islands, and these properties are not insulated, then these air source heat pumps are going to run considerably more expensively than an insulated property. And on that, I decided to phone quite a large company in the island this morning who have the MCS registration, and I asked them, if you go to a property that is uninsulated and the customer has requested an air source heat pump to replace a broken oil system, will you be breaching your MCS accreditation guidance if you do that in an uninsulated property? And the response I got was this. We had a phone call last week from a client in Harris. We discussed the insulation property, the existing insulation, and because it is inadequate, we refused and advised the customer not to go ahead and install an air source heat pump. So I think I'll stop at that point because I feel I've gone on a bit. I hope you understand why I've sort of steered the issue of air source heat pumps, but not deliberately off it, but to try and set in the background the importance of the ventilation issue, both obviously for the home energy efficiency, for the HEAPS ABS program, which we deliver on behalf of CNES, but the far, far wider issue of until the installation issue is resolved, it is going to have a massive impact on the ability for heating systems to be delivered. And again, I cannot emphasize this enough. Nobody can go into a property today and delivering any scheme, whether it's eco funding, whether it's HEAPS funding, whether it's government funding, whether it's utility funding, nobody, everybody. The PAS has to be applied across the UK, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. That's why our ABC scheme, our Aiming Beyond Cancer scheme, and it breaks my heart because right now I have over 50 people with an active cancer diagnosis that I should not be speaking to you. I should be out there actively engaging and delivering to these people, and not one of them will get anything as far as I can see until this is resolved. And the resolving of this, I don't think is going to be soon.
Well, thank you very much, Donald, and certainly do recognise the passion you have for the work you do and for those who are dependent on that. I imagine there'll be a lot of interest and a number of questions and observations that members may have. Can I just ask you, are you able to stay with us for a period of, if we have a short break just now, a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back for maybe questions after that? Is that?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, I'll stay.
I know you wish to be elsewhere, but I think
no, I'm actually on a day off, so I'm free all day. So
that's devotion.
Well, thank you very much for that, Donald. I think what you've said has thrown up so many issues. I think I would look to if our colleague Councillor Neil Mackay has some views on that he shared some time back as well, and maybe when we come back he will come into the discussion as well. But I think there's a huge level of interest in this. Before we just break for just take a 10-minute break, can I just ask convener, do you want to come in, and if colleagues, if you bear with me till we have a break and then come back with our questions, if that's okay. Convener.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much to Donald for the presentation. Although I'm not sure that we should be looking at it as a positive thing. I think this is the most ludicrous thing that I have come across in all the time I've been at in the council, and it's going to have a huge impact on every house in our community, from the Butt to Barra and Battersea. And I think it's absolutely crazy, and I think we do need to engage with government at both, if it has to be at Westminster and the Scottish Government, we need to engage with that right now, as soon as we possibly can, because this is going to have a huge impact. And as Donald said, this is going to start rolling forward in March of next year. And it's just absolutely crazy. And I think there are real issues there for us to discuss with the Scottish Government as well, in terms of their relationship with the Green Party, because there is no doubt that that is part of the equation as well. And I'll just leave it at that just now, because I know that this is something that all, members are going to be quite intense in terms of the discussion that we have over the next wee while.
Thank you very much, convener.
Chair, if I could just quickly come in on that one. This has been raised in the Scottish Parliament because Alistair Allen got in touch with me about a constituent in Uist, and the constituent in Uist was supposed to be getting a heating upgrade through the cancer scheme, and had contacted Alistair asking what the delay was in delivery of the scheme, and we hadn't at that point contacted the people on that scheme to explain the issue. So I went back to Alistair and I explained to him, first of all, the reason why we were unable to do so, because we have to comply with the ventilation. But I said to Alistair, but you need to understand, Alistair, it's far wider than that. And the following day, we were then brought into a meeting with Scottish Government officials and Alistair. And the day Patrick Harvey did his initial speech in the Parliament, Alistair Allen asked a question and stood up and raised the discussion that he had with ourselves about the installation and the ventilation concerns. So it has been raised in the Parliament, but I agree with you. This does have to be raised to the highest level, because it is now seriously impacting delivery. Just one more thing that may be of real interest to members is, and this comes back to something that Ian Watson provided me with, there was an officers meeting of all the officers in the local authorities who deliver the heat SABS programme, and we were provided with a slides pack from that. The accruals for the 2020-21 programme, which had an overall budget of £56 million, the accrual is 53 million. And I think that sets out for you something of the scale of what we're looking at here. And whilst COVID is a contributory factor to that, I think there already you're beginning to see the impact of this publicly available standard, this ventilation issue.
Thank you very much, Don. I think I mean it's horrendous as you describe it, and the challenges and the hiatus that it's created, preventing people who are in desperate need of getting some assistance in their condition and generally, of course, as well. I think you highlight some very important matters that we need to think about just how we react to that. So if members are can I just take a 10-minute break, meet back here in 10 minutes. If you could rejoin us, Donald, I would really appreciate that, and thank you for availing your time on your day off as well. So 10 minutes.
Okay.
think we all appreciate now the difficulties, and I must admit I was aware of qualification issues, but the practical implications in certain home types I was not as appreciative of, and I thank you, Donald, for that. I think we all see the difficulties now. That's where we take that, where we can go with that, because I think none of us in here is satisfied with the prospect of not having these benefits being delivered into homes because of the number of hurdles and the height of the hurdles to overcome in this, and the fact that the finance isn't being drawn down and hasn't been drawn down over the past year is just a testimony to the difficulty in complying with that legislation. I'll take a couple of, if I know we all have views on this, and if it can be as brief as possible, what I'd like to move to is an outcome from the presentation and where we go with it, and possibly I would suggest that making a representation to government, to both governments, should be something that we would be heading towards on this, just to express our extreme concerns about the implications. We all recognise the difficulties of the climate challenge, but when it comes to impacting on people and actually being a stumbling block to improve their own homes, and particularly adding to fuel poverty, it is not an outcome I'm sure that any legislator will get from this. So can I take Councillor Dodson, Councillor Mackenzie then?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, thank you very much, Donald, for that speech. Doom and gloom. That's the way I look upon it. One of the reasons, the questions I'd like to ask is the increase in air ventilation, etc., cutting off the bottoms of the doors, etc. Have they taken into account any advice from the fire regulations? Because we're told if a fire breaks out, shut your doors, etc., etc. If the ventilation is there, surely that would, I would assume, increase the fire. So I don't know if the fire departments have come in on this at all. Thank you.
Councillor Mackenzie, if I can maybe just hold the responses, Donald, if you can just maybe take them collectively once we get a couple of questions. Councillor Ray Mackenzie.
Ray Mackenzie, Stornoway said. Yes, thanks to Donald, first of all. We're all thanking Donald, but we're really regretting hearing it, actually. But basically, what I take out of this is that householders can't afford the air source pumps. Householders cannot work them. Tradesmen cannot do the work because they're not qualified or not going to be qualified for long enough, and there won't be any around. Firms cannot get qualified tradesmen. If the work is done, then either it cannot be done properly, or there'll be so many holes cut in the houses that it makes these air source pumps useless. So I think that's not a very good outcome of the whole thing. And I think that this pass category is absolutely ridiculous. And it's probably not possible anyway, throughout, not just here, but throughout the country, it just won't be possible. It's just farcical. And I would go further, and I would say that we just don't accept it. And that we say the Western Isles don't accept it and let them come back on it.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, if we can't move forward on it, the people that will be suffering as a consequence will be the householders who can't get the benefit of these higher insulation values for their homes and the replacement costs for say an oil system. Yeah. If they so needed.
Sorry, Chairman, but I wasn't saying that the air source pumps were not of use somewhere in modern houses and so forth. So I'm not suggesting that. What I'm saying is that we don't accept these regulations as they stand.
Yeah, I appreciate your frustration in that, and I think we all share that. I think the difficulty for contractors will be that they will be obligated to undertake work, if they do undertake the work, to in compliance with any scheme that they're involved in, or else they will not be able to get access to that work. Councillor Finisher.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also like to thank Donald on his excellent presentation, and speaking about the insulation first. I mean, the air source pumps are one thing, or the air source heating. I think we all know from past history that they certainly didn't work for HHP when they put them into uninsulated homes. You know, historically it didn't work, and it was far more costly. But as regards the insulation, I find it, you know, I've been involved in it myself since it began, in the insulation and working on these homes. I've yet to hear of anyone complaining about dampness in any of these homes that have been insulated, whether it's room on roof or the IWI. And to put tradesmen through 160 hours or whatever it was of sort of college work, guys that are, I mean, it's not rocket science to fit insulation on plasterboard. And for this now, and all these different and you know, all these regulations to be taken in, is you know, it's absolutely absurd, really. And I think, yeah, we should be going to the Scottish Government and should be approaching our MSP and our MP and making strong representation. You know, that things are different here. I mean, there's no point in putting all that insulation and heating systems into houses here when it's all going to be, there's plenty of drafts already without all that vents and whatever else they want. And I think we should really be making strong representation to our MSP and MP. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stewart. I think the challenges and the difficulties for the industry, we certainly have a huge sympathy for them in the difficulties as they've been presented to us. And I think we heard some of these difficulties from our colleague, Councillor Mackay, I think online over the past number of weeks as well. It's a difficult one because, you know, if we're to move forward on this, we need to get some sympathetic consideration for the difficulties. We have perhaps the greatest level of inadvertent ventilation in our homes in the islands because of our rurality and our sparsity. Many places throughout the country, whether we have ventilation, whether we want it or not, in effect. So to have to add to the ventilation to meet this pass, I think is what the real crux of it is. And I'm not sure there is an easy answer to it, but we certainly, I absolutely agree with you that we need to make representation to highlight the impact on island communities. And really, again, it brings to the fore the need for legislators to take account of the disproportionate impact that legislation has on certain areas of the country, and particularly on remote island communities. Failure to do that is really going to cause this very situation, a hiatus, that we can't get the benefit of better heating systems, more insulation, and we have to suffer greater levels of fuel poverty, and that is only going to get worse as a consequence of this, in my own view. I say, Councillor Graham, do you want to go? McLean.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Donald, for that very enlightening, and I use that word very carefully, presentation, but it was with passion as well, I could see. Can I go on to just the key responses that you're making to this? One of them fills me with a bit of apprehension, and the other one fills me with a bit of hope. You're saying that, if I'm picked it up correctly, you've signed an MOU with Edinburgh College. Mm-hmm. That is obviously to deliver this, and I take it this is the UK government that is taking for this, because I'm a wee bit a problem whether this is a devolved issue or whether it's not. It seems to be a UK a government that's putting this out, so it's not a devolved. I'm seeing the director actually saying so. It's a UK government. So maybe we should be all going Scottish nationalists then at this stage. This looks as if they'll be giving us a wee bit more of a plug, you guys. Yeah, to be looking at that, you've signed an MOU with you've invested in retrofit assessors, etc. You've done a fair bit in order. I can see what the chairman was saying, that this is a government directive in that sense that you have to move on it in some way.
And I'm seeing that you're moving, if I'm correct, you're moving it in some way by investing in retrofit assessors and so on in order to do that. But then you say that you're seeking alternative systems. Now I know you've put in that. That to me is the key to it. Are we going to go to alternative systems? Because in order to say to the government, look, we're not doing this, and I fully agree with what Ray says there, is that we should say to them, look, this does not fit the Western Isles. It doesn't fit us. Surely it wouldn't fit the Faroes or Iceland. We're getting pretty close to them as our near neighbour. But so you're saying that you're seeking alternatives. So I'm interested to know what development, what moves you've made in seeking alternative systems. That's all I'm looking at, because we need to work out a positive way, as the chair says, in order to try to overcome this way of doing things.
Thank you very much, Councillor McLean. Just before I ask Mr. McKinnon to answer, I know that the director wants to come in, and then I see the chief executive is also wanting to come in. So maybe if you could just answer Donald, that question that was just posed by Councillor McLean.
Okay, the reference there in the TIC response to the key issues, where we're talking about seeking alternative systems as a result of BASE's IWI guide. Unfortunately, this is not going to sound good. If you think this is mad, this is only going to add to the madness of it. BASE in September issued a good practice guide for the insulation industry. And that good practice guide removed in one sweep the system that we were using to install internal wall insulation and room and roof insulation in the islands. To come back to the point raised by one of the councillors, Councillor Mackenzie raised, can we reject the system? And I needed to answer that and bring that in. We can't reject it. And the reason we can't reject it is because in order for us to deliver this, we have to, the retrofit coordinator goes out to our property, he then draws up what essentially is a plan of the installation that's going to be installed in that property. It then leaves him and it leaves TIG, and it goes to a third-party independent body who assess that plan to ensure that it is complying with the ventilation. And if it's not, they will then come back and say, you need to do this in order to get it to comply with the ventilation guidance. But in addition to that, the system that you're proposing to install has to be an approved system. So we sent our entire supply chain, bankrolled by TIG, to British Gypsum's training academy in Kirby in Cumbria. They were all down there for a week, and the outcome of that was that they came back, and following online audits of them doing installs, they became carded operatives. We need to have a recognised system, because that in turn is what generates the 25-year guarantee that's issued when the work is complete. In September, when BASE issued their insulation guide, they removed the British system, the British Gypsum system, as a system that they would recognise. So we lost all our carded operatives, we lost all the money we invested in all of that, that was gone. And when we're talking there about seeking alternative systems, we are now engaging with another supplier, and we are currently looking to retrain the supply chain with that system, because the system that we were installing was removed. We don't know why they removed it, they just did, and that's BASE for you. So I wish that that was a sort of a suggestion that there's a way out of this. Right now, I don't see a way out of this. If I can answer the other couple of questions that were raised, Councillor Dodson raised the issue about fire. I agree with you entirely. I was in the fire service in Stornoway for 17 years, and if there's one thing that spreads fire inside a property, then it is air movement, and that is significantly going to lead to fire spread within a property. We all know that drafts and fire spread will be significant in these properties because of the amount of air change. There has been no representation whatsoever from the fire service or concerns raised. I haven't seen it in any of the forums we have attended. These tend to be attended, as you would expect, by the industry and the industry are raising the concerns that we're looking at today. Councillor Stewart raised the issue about raising this with the MP and the MSP. As I said, it has already been raised with the MSP, and it is both a Scottish Government issue and it is a devolved issue. It is a devolved issue in terms of it's the UK Government and BEIS that oversee the delivery and the implementation of these standards that have been introduced. So it is, in that sense, something that needs to be raised with the MP. And I think I've covered.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. McKinnon. Can I ask the director if you want to come in and then make a comment on just the way forward on this, really, which seems to be quite difficult to see how we can chart our way through.
Thanks, Chair. What I would say in the era of climate change and the need to achieve carbon emission reductions, I think everyone knows we have to transition to clean technologies.
Yeah.
That transition has to be just, however. And what we're seeing through these two elements of legislation, the withdrawal of boiler subsidies and the past legislation, is a transition that is simply not just for the Outer Hebrides. It is a transition that is too rapid, too restrictive, too costly, and will create additional levels of fuel poverty and additional levels of real absolute poverty. Therefore, we have no option but to engage with both governments, to engage with MP and MSP, to speak to BEIS and to speak to the Scottish Government. We need to find a methodology that allows a derogation on both of these issues for the Outer Hebrides. I think we possibly have common cause with our island colleagues in Orkney and Shetland, and there is always weight to working in tandem with others. What both governments seem to be bringing in is sledgehammer legislation that may work at a UK and a Scottish level, but certainly will not work at an Outer Hebrides level. So I think as a matter of urgency, we have to engage with both governments and their officials, with MP and MSP, to see is there a way for some form of derogation or mitigation for the Outer Hebrides in regard to these issues.
Thank you very much, Director. I see the Chief Executive wants to come in on this as well.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very briefly, but the Director has made most of the points. This issue has been on the agenda for the Islands Chief Executives for a couple of meetings now. We intend to take it to the Island Strategic Group meeting on 8th of December, as well as directly to, with your permission, directly to the relevant MPs and MSPs. It is an issue with a particular impact, as Mr. McKinnon said, on the Highlands and Islands, and particularly the islands. We all know, as the Director has said, we need to change, but the question is by what time and in what manner, and the outcomes will simply not be achieved with this methodology. So we do have that common cause with Orkney and Shetland, and we will use that to the full based on what's said at the committee today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I think the view of the committee, and I'm sure the view of the entire council, will be fairly clear on this.
Chair, could I possibly come in for a minute there, just to make a comment? I referred earlier on to the slide pack that we were provided with from the meeting of the HEAPS ABS officers from the local authorities. In that slide pack, there was a suggestion from the Scottish Government that local authorities could, if they wanted, seek the Scottish Government to move back to delivering all the insulation programmes using PAS 2030-2017. That's gobbledygook, apart from the fact that PAS 2030-2017 has none of the ventilation requirements that PAS 2030-2019 has. So there is no need for us to be going around doing door undercuts, drilling holes in walls, doing trickle vents, none of that. That standard does not apply in 2017. So that is, I think, something that I would steer the committee to certainly be bringing up and maybe Ian Watson could provide the committee with a copy of the slides pack where they can see that proposal and suggestion by the Scottish Government, because it certainly is a route out of this right now, short term.
Thank you very much for that. I think that's something that's very useful, and I think if I look to the director to see if we can follow that up. I think Councillor Johnny McKeever wants to come in on that.
Thank you, Chair. Johnny McKeever, Lochatua. I'm not a member of the committee, but it's just an observation here. I find it quite ironic that after being told for years not to have chimneys on our houses because they cause drafts, they now want us to fill our houses full of holes to cause these drafts. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, indeed. The convener, do you want to come in just to that final point?
Just very briefly, and I've noted what Donald has said, but there is a real imperative to this, because this is going to be rolled out from, I think, March, you said. Mm-hmm. This is going to be rolled out, and that is part of the discussion we had earlier about that it's far too quick, and there is no real understanding of how it's going to work out at the end of the day. And the other thing we need to link in with that is in relation to fuel poverty. We had a list there of the different means of providing heat in a house, whether that be oil or gas or electric. That has to be part of the equation as well, because if we leave that out, then we could end up with houses full of insulation and nothing to keep heat in the house. So I think we need to take that forward, and we need to take it forward as quickly as possible. Otherwise, we could be way behind in terms of what we're going to be able to do at the end of the day. And we should be talking about it in terms of, as the director said, we should be talking about in terms of derogation. And that is a mechanism that is used quite often when people realise, maybe weeks or months after they made a decision, they say, oops, we need to do this one differently. And I suggest that we do that right across, as was said by Orkney, Shetland, the Western Isles, and probably the west coast of the mainland as well, who will suffer the same consequences.
Thank you very much, Convener. Chief Executive, do you want to come back in again?
No, sorry, legacy hand, Chair, sorry.
Okay. Thank you for that. Well, I think the dissatisfaction with the current situation is very, very apparent. I think what's been suggested is that we make representation to government, both governments, about the particular impact of the PAS and a number of elements of the PAS on our island communities, and as Mr. McKinnon was saying, perhaps one way forward might be to not simply abandon any standards, but to look at the former standard, which did not have the same ventilation requirements. And perhaps the mitigation for the islands could be to look at continuing with that pass for a period of time. If you're happy for the director to look into matters along these lines and to make representation, are you happy for that? And I'm sure the director will advise us of the strategy that we can best adopt to bring that to both governments. And I think there is a great level of urgency with this. And as the Chief Executive has also said, to work with our island colleagues in the Northern Isles to see if we can collectively put some more shoulder to this. Are you happy with that as a way forward?
Chairman, I see Mr. Wilson there. Is he going to come in now?
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Isn't he
sure
us to speak?
Sure, I didn't think he was in here in the meeting.
Maybe he's not.
I think the Wilsons and the Watsons are confusing both of us.
So he's not.
Okay. Right. I don't think Stuart is with us. Is he, Donald?
No, Stuart is actually on the mainland today, but I did advise him. I did phone him during the break just to update him on our discussion, and I did advise him that the meeting was being live streamed. So I assume that I can't see, but I assume he is live streaming. If I'm able to, can I just make one further comment?
Absolutely.
To try and put a bit of sunshine into the discussion that we've had today, because obviously it is a huge concern for us, obviously as a company, in terms of our ongoing viability, because this is, as you will imagine, significantly impacting on the finances of TIG. However, in discussion with quite a number of air source heat pump installers across the islands, they are saying that they are able to fit air source heat pumps into the properties that have had internal wall insulation and room and roof insulation delivered through the CNES programme. And that's something that's very, very, very positive for us to hear, because in these properties that have been upgraded, the installers are saying air source heat pumps are an superb cost-saving alternative to the systems that previously were installed. So people who got IWI room and roof, they've got oil, they've got gas, they've got electric, they then switch to air source, and the air source there, because of the insulation properties in these properties, they are noticing a significant saving. So it can be achieved, it can be done, but we have to hammer the message. It has to be insulation first, and insulation has to be done in a sensible, deliverable way.
Thank you very much. So I think the direction of travel is clear. The strategy will develop as we get more information from the director, and the representation will need to be made to both governments. And I think if we can pull our partner island local authorities into the debate, I'm sure they're already experiencing the same difficulties in their own communities as well. So if you're happy with that as a way forward, and the director will advise us of the course of action that he will take on that. You happy with that, Mr. Mackay? Okay. Thank you for that, and thank you, Don, for your presence. I hope you will enjoy the rest of your day off. If we move to the next item on our agenda, it's under performance management, and the report is for noting provides an overview of the community's directed business plan progress and related performance for Q2. Business performance of relevance to this committee is in relation to consumer and environmental services, and is at section 6.1 to 6.4, and the housing services element is at section 6.5 to 6.9 of the report. The director will speak to the report and answer any questions.
Thank you, Chairman. In regard to consumer and environmental services, they continue to work towards the delivery of their 2021-22 service plan. 95% of the way there, and just closing in on the last elements of that. The service continues to apply COVID regulation in liaison with Police Scotland and with Public Health, and they've carried out 300 business interventions with 50 visits to businesses to advise them over the period, beginning to move out of some of the restrictions, and the food inspection programme restarted in September. In regard to housing services, the main focus remains on the affordable housing programme. Progress remains steady, 161 units completed since the beginning of the present programme, 126 units presently on site, and a further 92 units going through assessment or planning processes. As members will be aware, the Strategic Housing Investment Plan was submitted to the Scottish Government at the end of October. We're waiting for feedback on that. We hope to see the Cabinet Secretary. I'll have a meeting with the Cabinet Secretary for Housing over the next week or so. We have also, since we last met, Hebridean Housing Partnership have released their housing needs survey. Our staff are presently analysing that, and we hope to be having a seminar on housing in the early new year, where we'll be able to feedback on any issues arising from the meeting with the Cabinet Secretary, and a bit of analysis on the housing needs survey undertaken by HHP. So we'd hope to have a seminar in the new year which will allow us to tease into some of these issues. Financial performance is outlined at 9.1, and both services are working to financial targets and hope to outturn, if not ahead of financial target. by year end. Happy to leave it at that, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fever. Encouraging report on performance to date. Colleagues, convener.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the Director for that. In relation to the care unit in Crowles that was likely to be transferred to HHP, I just wonder what the progress is there. And I note that in a report later on, in terms of disposing of assets, that there is an issue there in terms of the difference in cost. And I just wonder whether, not necessarily just now, but whether we can get some more information about that, because there have been other care units right across the islands. The Garibus one and others have been sold as a dwelling house rather than a care unit, and I think it would be beneficial, particularly if there are 4 new builds going to be built around Crowles, that it would be beneficial to have the 2 developments at the same time. They're only a couple of 100 metres apart.
Thank you very much, convener. I must say I wasn't aware that there was any particular difficulty. There have been delays with a number of services being delivered, but I think that maybe can look at that either offline or come back to it later on, if you're happy with that.
Happy to, Chair, just to share that information offline after the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, no other comment or question on that. I think it's obviously encouraging. Having regard to our previous item, I'm sure you will pick up a significant amount of additional new work as well, which is something that we should be mindful of, that, you know, every time we do identify more work to be done, that is putting an additional burden onto the services that are quite struggling at the moment as well. But I appreciate that you have to prioritise some things, and obviously that means sometimes deprioritising other things. So if you're happy with that, convener.
Thank you, Chair. I should have declared an interest at the start of my speech there, in that I'm a director on HHP, but I'm representative for the Comhairle as well. So I just want to record that. Thank you, Chair. Thank you
for the record. I think colleagues will be aware of that, but thank you, and that will be recorded. Okay, that report is there for noting. And the next item on our agenda is at item 6, and it's the performance management for health and social care. The report is for noting also, and it provides an overview of the health and social care system and related Comhairle services. And this is for Q2. Mr. Nick Fairs will speak to the report and answer any questions. Mr. Fairs.
So thank you for the introduction. So I'm conscious of time, so I'll deal with the elements very much kind of by exception. So I'll take colleagues to section 6, which is very much around kind of system performance, and 6.3. And what I wish to kind of highlight really is our position around kind of delayed kind of discharge. So it's a product of both kind of higher attendances, but also, as we discussed in the last kind of meeting for kind of quarter on, around kind of capacity in the kind of care at home kind of system, but also our kind of care homes. So what I wanted to kind of to draw attention to is that our daily delayed kind of discharge sits in the order of circa kind of 20 individuals. And I probably don't need to kind of labour the point kind of here around the, if you like, the risks that kind of carries to the individuals around kind of conditioning and that extended sort of stay in hospital. So if I move on from there and kind of have, if you like, kind of have a look at, so I'll come back to financial kind of performance, but I want to try and link some elements together. So I'm just going to move, if colleagues are comfortable, to section 9 around kind of workforce and share some sort of additional information. So in the report you can see our current kind of vacancy position. So that's the totality of adult social care. That's described in 9.2, and in round numbers, we're kind of close to 46 kind of individuals that we're seeking to recruit. You can see in the table above that we've had a level of success in recruitment in the in the first quarter of the year. But what I wanted to kind of share kind of today is some information that I didn't have at the time of writing the report, so I can, and it will come to ICMT kind of later this week and then on to the IJB. And this is around kind of recruitment, I guess, success, if you will, with our kind of two main partners. So if we look at the first 6 months of the year, for the caller, we advertised 38 kind of posts. We received 78 kind of applicants for those 38 posts, but we're only able to recruit to 20 of them. So our success rate, our fill rate, sits around 53%. And if one was to kind of contrast that with NHS kind of Western Isles in the same kind of period, so very similar posts. So in that space of probably grade D, grade E, so that would be a gender for change band kind of 2 and 3. So NHS Western Isles advertised 11 posts, had 68 kind of applicants, and appointed kind of 10 individuals into those kind of 11. So with a fill rate of 91 kind of percent. And the reason that I guess I'm highlighting that in the conversation kind of here, when we look at the position around kind of delayed discharge, the ongoing kind of challenges that we have around kind of recruitment and therefore the capacity kind of gap. I'm simply kind of wanting to kind of highlight that. We had quite an in-depth discussion the last time we met around kind of unmet need, and that position hasn't significantly deteriorated. It's now just a little over kind of 600 hours. The majority of that kind of sitting in the community around individuals who are assessed with an element of kind of need that we're not currently able to meet. But I think probably, and again, it wasn't available at the time that I kind of wrote this report. So this is kind of further support that's been announced from kind of Scottish Government in 2 areas. So I share that kind of positively, not that it's without its kind of challenges. So the first is some non-recurring kind of funding kind of in year, which is around supporting interim kind of care arrangements. So if we consider those kind of 20 individuals who are kind of currently sitting in the space of being, if you like, medically kind of fit, but we're not able to discharge them back to home in the broadest sense of what home is, there is some additional kind of funding in year to be able to support and kind of facilitate that. And positively, it sits alongside some recurring kind of money. So when you look at a full year effect, it's close to 770,000 on an ongoing year-by-year basis to help build capacity more widely across our kind of community services. So I share that with kind of colleagues today. I have a paper that's going to kind of ICMT with plans around that kind of funding for some permissions, some decisions on Thursday, which I'll be able to kind of update about at the IJB kind of next week. But I simply wanted to share those 2 elements in terms of, I guess, the kind of current risks that we have in our system. And I'll conclude, if you want, when taking us back to kind of to finance, given that I've just been kind of talking around additional funding from SG, in the position as we are tracking in terms of kind of year end to our outturn is a break even kind of position, which is a positive kind of shift from when I last kind of reported to you. And that's achievable simply through earmarked reserves. So it's a positive kind of position in year, but as we kind of go forwards, we will need to kind of pay closer attention to our financial position, and if you like, the underlying kind of risks that I highlighted to you when we last met. So I'll close there, recognising there's a lot more kind of detail in my report itself, but happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fierce. I think it's encouraging to hear that there is a reasonable level of recruitment. Perhaps just if I could kick off, the other side of that coin is retention, and is our hemorrhage rate, is it getting worse? Is it steady? Is it getting better? And maybe I could just leave it at that for you to give a comment.
So in terms of retention, we're not seeing a significant kind of deteriorating kind of position currently. What I I will kind of point to, and it'll come, I think it's next week, to policy and kind of resources. So there's a conversation, and there was an email that was kind of shared yesterday by the chief executive around the desire to look at, if you like, how we reward and then retain the predominance of our kind of community workforce, so specifically kind of care at home. So there's I think there's to be a full discussion on that kind of matter next week, and I think that will be important. So when there was a comprehensive listening exercise undertaken by the Chief Social Work Officer, and that differential in kind of pay, whilst it's set nationally in terms of terms and conditions, is, you know, it's something that's kind of visible. There's a consciousness around it in terms of our kind of colleagues working in the community. And I'll seek to kind of illustrate that sort of further at ICMT later on kind of this week. But I think it's an important kind of question, and therefore the conversation, I think the rich conversation and then these decisions we take next week and policy and resources will be important in terms of ensuring we don't lose colleagues, if you like, from our partnership. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fierce. I think we're all, I certainly, I'm sure colleagues are encouraged to hear that the matter is being addressed, and we look forward to the report to the appropriate committee just to see how that is going to be addressed going forward. Councillor McLean.
Thanks, Chair. Can I, Mr. Fierce, thanks very much for the report, Mr. Fierce. But there are two elements that I would like to look at. First of all, it is the use of consultants within our hospital. For instance, I'll give you an example. I know of an individual who's been visiting hospital for the last 3 years and has actually on his 7th consultant. I think that's shocking. And it doesn't do anything for continuity for the patient or otherwise. And I'm sure many of us can go through the same thing. Every time you go to hospital, there's a different consultant, and the consultant can be as far away as just come up here for 2 weeks from India. We've already heard the examples of that at the last meeting. That's the first thing. And I'm seeing there's still you notice in your report, and thanks for that. The other one is the structure and pay grades and progression career paths in the care sector. And I'm disappointed, to be quite honest with you, that report is still outstanding. And when we go to the next, at the end of our things, we see that report should have been presented at this series of meetings, but isn't there. And if we go to your report in section 8.5, section 9.1, there is this problem, and it's been a recurring problem. And I'm sorry for repeating myself over the last 5 years. But this is the recurring problem of recruitment and retention of care staff. We have a huge problem, and we've got a huge problem is because we're dependent on agency staff. And agency staff are working along what I would call retained staff, and are on a different pay level altogether, and significantly different. And we did mention the last meeting I was at, and I think that was, we talked about, I think the leader was forefront in saying this, that there was going to come up something, and I was hoping that it would come here to do with the structure of pay grades, progression, career paths in the care sector. We haven't got it. That's a disappointment.
Yeah, I think, although I recall making a comment at the last meeting as well, although this wasn't particularly welcome, but there is a particular process for the evaluation of salaries and remuneration, and the appropriate committee for dealing with that is Policy and Resources Committee. And I believe, although there's not a report coming to this committee, there is expected to be a report going to PNR to address the very comments that you made. But I appreciate that there was an undertaking given that a report would come back. Perhaps it was inappropriately going to come back to this committee rather than to the PNR committee, who has the responsibility to deal with pay and conditions and address these matters. And it is being addressed, and that report is coming up before committee next week. So I hope you'll take some comfort that whilst it's not come to this committee, it has been followed up and it is coming to PNR committee. If you want to come back on that, it comes to, I think it may be just the number of microphones. Okay, do you want to try your microphone again, Councillor?
Thanks. Yeah, that's comforting to know that it's coming back next week. That we will see it next week. That is an assurance you're giving. And take it. Is that correct?
I understand that there's an item on the agenda of PNR.
So the report will be here next week.
Perhaps I'll invite the leaders to come in. If you, Councillor McCormack, could you just turn off? I'll bring you back into the discussion just so the leader can come.
So next week we are going to outline the system we're going to set up to try and improve pay and conditions. There is going to be a small working group to try and address short-term fixes, and then there are long-term issues. I should say, and I'm sure Councillor McLean will agree, it is not all about pay. It has got to do with pay, and these particular aspects around finance will be a matter for PNR, but it's a lot more than pay as well. And there are systemic issues and around the conditions and the working conditions and the organisational conditions that will have to come through this committee too eventually. But certainly in terms of the short-term fix, in terms of trying to find a way in which remuneration can be enhanced and the working conditions make a bit more palatable quickly, because it is an urgent issue. It's not something that we can, we can't dilly-dally on this. We do have to act on it. So, and that's why we're forming a group quickly. We should have met before the next PNR. We hope to meet this week to try and work our way forward, and I'll give an update at PNR next week.
Yeah, that's encouraging. And as you rightly say, it's not all about pay. It's about work practices, progression, whatever have you. That has been ongoing for the last 4 years. We have to be honest. We have not got a workforce that are completely happy. And one of the reasons is we're losing is two things because of the work in which they're involved within. And I've said it already, and it is because of their practices at work and because of their pay grade that are leaving. I heard even this week that they're leaving to go to Tesco because their work conditions are better in Tesco and their wages are better in Tesco than they are in the home care. That should not be. And we've been on for this for 4 years, Chair, and we'll be when we depart next April, May. I'm sure I have the horrendous feeling that we will not have moved hardly an inch, and we haven't moved an inch on this in the last 4 years. I'll have to be honest, but I hope. And we have to be the eternal optimist in this, and we're given the leaders nod on that one, that we will move some way on it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor McLean. And the leader was absolutely right. The matter of pay is one thing, but then the working practices and rota formation and weekend working, all of these things are for the service to address, and Mr. Frears is committed to coming back with proposals on that as well. I had a number of members. Councillor.
Angus went back.
Yeah,
Angus was before me.
Councillor McCormack, do you want to come in, and then Ray McKenzie, and then come back to Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. This is undoubtedly a matter of real concern. Again, I've had quite a number of observations and representations in this particular area. And first of all, could I just say that I'm really surprised to hear that delayed discharges are on the go again. I recall at the beginning of COVID, delayed discharge disappeared in a fortnight, and we'd been told for donkey's years before that they couldn't do anything about it. So I am a bit disappointed that that's happening again. In regard to our care workers, they're hugely undervalued. I mean, ultimately at the end, it will be a national decision on pay, I presume. But anything at all that we can do locally, we must attempt to do. And one of the things that was drawn to my attention recently, and I have mentioned this to the Chief Executive, is travel allowances. When people are driving in their own cars to houses and whatnot, there are some utterly absurd rules surrounding that, which could be rationalised surely locally, and some common sense applied to the situation. That would be very helpful. The fact that we are bringing in people from the mainland to do this doesn't help recruiting at all here, because these people have been paid twice as much as our own people are being paid, which is just absurd. And presumably we have to pay for their accommodation as well. Just crazy stuff. And it just demonstrates that if we were actually paying decent rates here to our own staff, we would have these staff and we would retain these staff. I'm conscious also that in order to cover shortages, largely caused by COVID, so I've been told recently, our own staff have been working very long hours in order to try and make sure that everybody who required support in their homes received that support. And I know that they actually enjoy doing that. They see that as a very positive service. So if, leader, in your conversations prior to our discussions next week, you can come up with a series of ways in which we can enhance the experience of our own care workers in the immediate term, I think that would be a really positive step in the right direction, and it might just help us to recruit more people in. We'll recruit people in when the people who are in are saying to their friends, this is a good job, I really like doing this job and I'm well paid for it. That's the way we'll recruit. But until they're saying that, we're going to have real difficulties. And the one final thing I would say is this, in the context of a national care service, I really worry. I mean, if we're going to hand this care service in its limping state that it's in over to health to look after it, it'll just get dumped in the wastebasket, if I can be as crude as that.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCormack. Councillor MacDonald and then Councillor McKenzie.
Thanks again, Chair. Norrie MacDonald, Skeera Row. I'm not a member of your committee, but as someone who has been fortunate enough to have been a recipient of care for my mother, I understand probably more than quite a few what's involved and how the staff are feeling. I have 2 points of care 4 times a day. That sometimes is 8 different carers, so I get a broad spectrum of opinion from them because I ask. And these guys are dedicated workers. They love their job. They love what they do. And we need to care for our carers. It seems that within the last maybe 10 to 15 years, something happened where we lost quite a lot of folk from the care service because possibly of a change in their pay and conditions. And it's not all about pay. They love what they do. You know, the conditions have probably been changed to negatively impacted, to negatively impact them with regard to shift patterns and shift allowances at weekends, time and a half, double time at weekends, mileage, etc. There are also issues with staffing, as we know, and the management of staffing seems to be a problem where we have folk off in one area, maybe an oversupply in another area which has been underutilised, and they joined up thinking of deploying the staff around even the Broad Bay area. Doesn't seem to be working. We have issues, I believe, down in Uist, where the 2 Uist coordinators who were in charge of home care and deployment of staff were asked to take over the Lewis emporium, shall we say, for want of a better, when sickness affected the staff here in Lewis, and as a result of them being asked to take over Lewis, they're now no longer working for the Comhairle. They left. 2 fantastic members of staff, I'm led to believe. So we've got to start thinking about what we're doing to our carers. And I asked 4 years ago in this Comhairle, probably even 5 now, why we're not conducting exit interviews with the folk we've lost and find out why they've left us. There has to be a reason, you know, and the reason has to be investigated, and we need to put right what they're telling us. You know, we need to liaise with staff. It's not just liaising with your middle management. That's not going to tell you anything, because they will tell you everything in the garden is rosy and the sun is always shining. I've asked, I'm sure Nick, Jack Libby, Emma McSween are fed up of me badgering them to do something to reinstate some of the terms and conditions that they had 10 plus years ago. We have a gap in the service of 30 to 40 to 50 staff, which is causing an underspend in the budget. Surely we can deploy some of this to address some of the issues. And I've asked for ideas to come back, and I would like the ideas to come back from within the department and not from this body of councillors, because if I was to propose, if any of us were to propose just now, we want to see X, Y, and Z put in their terms and conditions, you would get 31 councillors voting, do it now. Now, it should be the other way around. The service should be coming back to us with their proposals. And so far, I hope next week's meeting is going to deliver something, because at the moment, I am not impressed with what we've done in 4 years. That's partly down to myself and partly down to ourselves as a Comhairle. But we need to start addressing the issue of caring for our carers, asking them why they're not happy with their pay and conditions, because these are dedicated people who want to be working in care. One particular carer I had yesterday, she's been offered a job within the NHS. She loves her job. She doesn't want to go. She doesn't want to go back in as a theatre nurse. She wants to continue working where she is with the elderly, with this vocation she sees. She loves her job. So why are we trading on their goodwill when we should be delivering pay and conditions that are commensurate with their value to this community? And that's simply not happening. And unless we address it before the end of this Comhairle, I would say we failed, because if we need to do anything as a Comhairle, we need to deliver for our elderly and our young, the two ends of the spectrum. The only things that are really important here, and the elderly, the guys who built this country, we are failing them, and we need to put something right. And it's easy to put right if we get the ideas coming from the folk who know how we can best utilise the budgets available and deliver something that says thank you in respect of increased mileage allowance, shift allowance patterns at the weekend that get an enhanced payment, even an increase in pay if that's possible within the budget. But we've got to start looking at delivering something. And I hope next week's recommendations to policy and resources will do that, because at the moment, I'm not seeing anything and it's a failure.
Thank you very much. I think all of the things you say, I think it would resonate with all of the members in the chamber and those out with as well. I think we also, as well as those delivering the services, there are some extreme challenges in those who are trying to manage the delivery of services as well. And there's as you suggested, there's a degree of firefighting on a day-to-day basis where sometimes there's a home and somebody's waiting for somebody to deliver care to them, and for one reason or another, that particular allocated carer whose timetable for is ill or is not able to come in, and there's an element of firefighting comes in, and we do not have sufficient numbers of people standing by just to simply slot in, and that's very often what causes frustration to those who are delivering the services. This element of ad hocing, and ad hocing is a way of surviving, and it's not the way that we should be, planning to deliver our services. But I think needs must, and the fact that at times the service has to take in some carers from outside our area. The alternative is not to have care provided to a number of clients who are extremely deserving in it. And I think it's not the way forward, but it's at times we have to do what we have to do in order to deliver care to extremely needy clients. And I do have sympathy with all of them. I have great respect for those delivering the care, but I also sympathise with those that have the difficulties of trying to manage a service that's so dynamic on a day-to-day basis. Councillor Mackenzie.
Yes, I would look forward to, that we do have a major problem. I look forward to the report that's coming next week. And just on a separate issue, and I don't know if it's right, you can rule me out of order here, but with regard to care homes and delayed discharges, bed blocking, whatever. I remember many years ago, a consultant said to me that there was a danger that the Lewis Hospital would be run down, and I don't know how far down he, with great experience of the place, thought it would happen. But around about that time, when the place was built, there were 220 to 240 beds. There's now a quarter of that, if that. I think it's about 70 beds or whatever. Mr. Fairs will know exactly what the figure is. So how is that obviously doesn't affect bed blocking because we would have more empty beds. But how is that affecting things generally? The fact that we only have a quarter of the beds that we did have 10, 15 years ago. That's the main point. On the carers, I think it's. I agree with what Noddy says and what Colin says. We definitely have to come up with some solutions on that.
Thank you very much. Before I bring in Councillor McLean, can I just give an opportunity to Mr. Fears to come back to offer any comments on what has already been discussed and what has already been sought?
So thank you. So looking ahead to to next week, the options, the items for consideration. So they come directly from our colleagues, from our frontline colleagues, and that came from that really comprehensive, I'm going to call it a set of listening exercises that Jack and colleagues undertook. So there is a set of items for consideration that come from that, and not only is, if you like, a pay in simply in an hourly rate and a limit of that. There are other aspects that have been surfaced in this conversation around travel and certainly, if you like, weekend allowances. And I think that the challenge there, when we think about it, so when I look at it, is from a partnership perspective, that differential between, if you like, the single status terms and conditions and agenda for change is an issue, and it's something that we'll need to look at. If you to give you a broad indication of that differential, when you think about weekends and evenings, is in the order of £170 a week. So that's something that we will need to consider. In terms of the question around the bed base, some of that predates me, but for us to share in this conversation. So our bed base across the island, starting in the south, there are 5 acute beds in Barra, and then if we're thinking about OUAB, so in Benbecula we have 20 beds there, and then when we come to Western Isles Hospital, there are 72 beds, 3 of which are dedicated around paediatrics, 4 of those are around HDU, so for really poorly individuals. We have Erisort, which at the moment is being utilised to support us winter in terms of COVID, new variants of those aspects, and obviously we have our mental health beds. So that's the current position. I would struggle to comment on the decisions that were taken before my tenure around that reduction in bed stock. What I can say around delayed discharge is that even if one were to have, let's say by working example, a further 20 beds for when the individuals I was talking about at the start of this conversation, that doesn't meet their needs. So simply by retaining them in hospital, it doesn't help them, it doesn't further their recovery, or it doesn't particularly further their, if you like, their reablement going forwards. So I think it's important to think about it in that context. Thank you.
I wonder, thank you for that, Mr. Fear. I wonder if you could just answer in a quick couple of words. The question raised by Councillor MacDonald. My own understanding is that it is the council policy that there's an exit interview offered to all employees who leave our employment, and is that the case, that these are undertaken and that these are analysed? Just very quick.
So I'm in receipt of summary reports. I don't have the totality. I don't have the totality of that. So I can certainly see the themes that are emerging through there. But it's as my comment, not the book. My comment is there's an invitation to the individual, and so if somebody wishes to take it up, I think that I would applaud that, and I think that gives us an opportunity for some mutual learning. But similarly, if an individual chooses not to, then that's their their choice. I think the challenge is not for a long conversation, because I am really conscious of time, both for colleagues and my own. Is that when we're, I guess from a Western Isles perspective, positively, we're in a position of quite a buoyant economy in the greatest kind of scheme of things. So when individuals are considering work kind of opportunities, there are a number of opportunities that sit in front of them. So in our conversation kind of next week at Policy and Resources, that's part of the backdrop, plus the differentiator that I was talking about. So I hope that's helpful. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Mr. Councillor MacLean, and then come back for a final comment from Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. I'm glad Mr. Mackenzie raised the concern we have about what I call the decommissioning of the Stornoway Hospital. Have we got an actual record of how many beds are being utilised in the Stornoway Hospital? And secondly, what is the function of the wards that have been decommissioned? Because there's been a substantial decommissioning, as I call it, or just emptying out of wards in the Stornoway Hospital. So I would like to look two figures: the actual beds that are in the Stornoway Hospital. If he's got, Mr. Fairs has got it on his fingertips, but if not, he could come back to another meeting with it. And the function of the wards that have been decommissioned. So that to see, because I agree entirely with what Mr. Mackenzie says there. We've got a Stornoway Hospital that was built state of the art some X number of years ago, 20 years ago, is it, or thereabouts? You go to it today and you put away to Glasgow or to Inverness or whatever, even to have words with a consultant. That's the first thing. The second thing is, it brings me back to, I think one of the reasons we're losing our care staff is because of we have devalued them, and I think Mr. MacDonald has actually encapsulated that in his argument earlier today. During the COVID, we had these, and I call them wonderful Thursday evenings, and you went out to clap. It was the NHS you were clapping, but there was no word of clapping for the care staff, who were absolutely going through far more than the NHS staff. But of course, this was a recommendation from another dysfunctional government in London. But we've actually devalued them, and in fact, we should be actually valuing them. And that's why I'm looking forward to the recommendations next week, and hopefully we will see that they are doing an exceptional work, and we should commend them and help them as much as we can.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacLean. I don't think within this chamber we certainly don't devalue or undervalue them, but finding that a way to address the very legitimate concerns that have been raised is challenging, and I think we are making progress in that regard. One final comment to Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. Councillor Norrie MacDonald, Skeeter. My fear next week is that we'll end up with a 20-page report, brilliantly written in council speak, that will absolutely tell us all the reasons why we can't do anything significant to address the issues with our carers. There'll be a 20-page report that we'll mull over and wonder how it took so much effort to come to the conclusion that very little can be done. I'd rather see a paragraph that tells us how we can pay our staff £1 an hour more, how we can give them 90 pence a mile, what they used to get for their mileage, and how we can deliver time and a half and double time for weekend and other shifts. It'll just take 3 lines, straightforward, and how we're going to pay for it. End of.
Well, I sincerely hope you will be disappointed that it's not your former understanding that will be delivered. And I am aware that progress is being made in regard to the enhancements and allowances, and that is where there's maximum flexibility for us to work, and that is the area that is being looked at and actively being looked at the moment. I am aware of that. Whether that comes back as a final proposal next week, I don't know. I haven't seen the report, and we will no doubt await that. But I thank all members for their interest in that, and that report on performance is for noting. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 7 on our agenda, and this is a matter that we raised previously at committee, and it's the report. It is for noting this report provides information on the forthcoming requirement for all domestic properties in Scotland to have interlinked fire and smoke alarms from February next year. That's just a couple of months away. Angela Smith will speak to the report and answer any questions. Angela.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as Chair mentioned, this report is to provide members with information on the forthcoming requirement for all domestic properties in Scotland to have interlinked fire and smoke alarms from February 2022. The changes, the law came about because of the tragic Grenfell fire in London in 2017. So from the end of February onwards, the requirement is that domestic properties in Scotland will require to have interlinked fire and smoke alarms. And if I can just draw your attention to 6.2. The new regulations state that we need one smoke alarm must be installed in the room most frequently used for general daytime living purposes, your living room, for example. One smoke alarm should be installed in every circulation space, upstairs, downstairs, hallways, and one heat alarm should be installed in every kitchen. Now, the smoke alarms and the heat alarms need to be interlinked. And where you've got a carbon fueled appliance such as a boiler, a gas boiler, or for example a stove in your living room, you would require a carbon monoxide detector as well. At 7.1 in the report and 7.2, it gives an overview of the kind of alarms you can get. You can get sealed battery alarms which have a, for example, a 10-year battery life. And you can have, the other option is mains wired alarms, which you will need an electrician to wire in for you. The alarms are interlinked by radio frequency, so you don't actually need Wi-Fi for them. And there's just some information at 7.5 on the following standards, on the standards that they need to comply with. It is the property owner's responsibility for meeting the standard, and the cost, it is the property owner's responsibility for meeting the costs. However, there is some help available, and Scottish Government at 9.2, Scottish Government has provided 500,000 funding to allow Care and Repair Scotland to support older disabled homeowners with installations. It is anticipated that that will not be enough. So at 9.3, to be eligible for support, there is some information there. Council tax banding of A to C in your home, and the applicant must also be in receipt of guaranteed pension credit and so on. There may be a building regulations requirement, depending on the work that's going to be carried out. And at 11.1, there may be an impact on your household insurance if you don't carry out the work. But again, advising homeowners to contact their own insurance companies to find out what will apply to them. So I guess in short, from February onwards, we will require to have these interlinked fire and smoke alarms in place in our properties. And just as a further recommendation, if anybody is thinking about having an electrician come in to wire in the smoke alarms and the fire alarms, the recommendation is to get in touch with them quickly because their time is filling up. I had one, I know somebody last week I spoke to someone last week who is working solidly until the end of January now to fit fire and smoke alarms. So the recommendation is to speak to somebody as soon as possible. I guess happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Angela, for that reminder. I must admit, when this came up, I was looking at our own house, and the linked smoke alarms that were installed quite some time ago would appear to become redundant now, with an expectation that you replace them every 10 years or so. There seems to be little incentive on really putting in hardwired ones if both the battery operated and the hardwired ones are actually potentially redundant after 10 years. So it may be that electrician installed ones might become an easier option and more likely to get installed. But I mean, I think there's a significant amount of cost for householders, and particularly for those with not a lot of financial means to fund this. the funding at a national level seems a high amount, but I would guess at a local level the amount of money available would be relatively small. But it is obviously an important thing to look at, and the consequences of not installing them in terms of insurance cover and things like that in future is something that might be a bit worrying to some. But anything that can give early notice of a fire or smoke, toxic fumes in a house, it's obviously to be encouraged, and it is in following on the Grenfell debacle as it is now. Councillor MacDonald and then Councillor McLean.
Thanks again, Chair. Norrie MacDonald, Skeeter. Again, I'm not a member of your committee. Can I ask if the figure quoted here, 9.2, is a misprint? Is it £500,000?
No, I think it's £500,000. That's the information I got from the Scottish
For the whole of
Government.
For the whole of Scotland?
Yeah. Yes.
1,600 homes at £300 each.
Yeah. Unfortunately, and Age Concern considers this to be a huge underestimation of what is going to be required.
Huge underestimation. Well, by a factor of 10. My worry here is that a lot of people won't be able to afford this. You're talking £220 for the kit plus the installation, and you'll be lucky to get an electrician to do it before February. At what point does your insurance get negated by the fact that you haven't installed this if something happens to your house? What about the elderly who are probably completely unaware of what's happening here with regard to their house insurance? This is ill thought through. This is a minefield. I mean, I'm well aware of this, and I still haven't ordered my kit, and I still haven't got a Sparky. You know, I mean, it's something I can do. But my worry is there's an awful lot of people here. I mean, you're talking 1,600 homes across the whole of Scotland for people who we discussed fuel poverty issues earlier on. You know, forcing people to install these things, and vital as they obviously are, £500,000 is frankly a joke. This will not help an awful lot of people. So what happens after February? Have you got a cooling off period after that? Have you got a lag time where, you know, February was the date, but you're allowed up to June to get it installed? Because with the best will in the world, you're not going to get Sparkies unless they wanted the homers to come out. And we're already struggling for tradesmen in the islands. We know that. So, I mean, the amount is paltry. The implications are huge. I think we should need to kick this back up, because a lot of people here are going to get caught out. Somebody's house will burn down. Somebody will not have a fire alarm installed, and their insurers will just turn around and say to them, sorry, but it's a get-out clause for many insurance companies, this. I just wonder, is there any leeway after February?
Angela, do you want to come back? I would guess that this is legislation that's bringing it in, so the date of implementation is set. I suppose it's very difficult to second guess at this stage how insurance companies would deal with any particular eventuality, but yeah, we don't want to be alarmist, but we do want to highlight this as an important issue, and the fact of the funding that is being made available. It is, I think, in most people's views, wholly inadequate to support those that need to get that level of support. But before Angela comes back, now, can I just ask Councillor McLean just to make a comment and then come back to you, Angela?
I think Councillor MacDonald has covered most of what I was going to say, Chair. But the only thing that I would ask is, first of all, how much has been allocated to us, to our authority for this? It's 500,000, as he says, for as we heard, for over Scotland. How much has been allocated, or do you know? The other second thing is this February deadline. When was this? When was this brought out? Have we had prior notification of this? Was it 2 months ago, 3 months ago, or whatever? The older people that I'm talking to are actually totally unaware of the February. I know there was a drop, something came through the letterbox a couple of weeks ago or something like that. But they're now alarmist and saying we can't get somebody to do it before February. And the third thing is, you do mention, and I've actually checked on the cost of these things, and they are definitely on the internet over £200 for the one that's not hardwired, the sealed battery one. But the hardwired one will cost significantly more. And it depends on if you're in a one-story or a two-story, it'll cost extremely more than £500. You will not get it done because you've got to wire between the two rooms, upstairs and downstairs. It's a far bigger cost. And again, we could say, is there any way that we could have a fallback on this February 2022? As again, we're in islands and we've only got so many electricians in the island, and I can't see many getting this done by February 22.
Thank you very much for these comments. Just before I just bring Angela in, I do recall this coming forward at a committee maybe 2 years ago when it seemed to be in the long distant future, and it was raised again quite a number of months ago, and I really asked for a report again just to highlight to the general public just the imminence of this legislation, and it is Scottish Government legislation that this takes place. I do understand that there is no plan for any active enforcement at a domestic level of this, which is important, but nevertheless the concerns about whether householders are covered adequately by their insurance policies is a matter of some concern. Angela, do you want to come
yes,
back?
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be any kind of indication of a cooling off period. The cut-off point is the end of February. In terms of costs for the Comhairle, the 500,000 seems to be an amount that's allocated towards care and repair, and there's no indication of how it's going to be split up to individual care and repair bodies. In terms of costs to individuals, the costs vary enormously. I had a look on the internet myself, and you can buy packs of alarms on Amazon for £60–70. You don't really know what the quality of these items are going to be. You could go to an electrician. I had one myself last night, who came round to look at my property, and the cost could, because I'm wanting wired in alarms, the cost could, move into hundreds. Very difficult to say what the overall cost is going to be. And in terms of having a fallback, because we're an island authority, it's very difficult to gauge, because it is regulations that are coming in, what the response to that would be. In terms of all the kind of documents and things that I have read, it's been reported for a couple of years, and it has come back to the MAUG and has come back to the Comhairle intermittently. It's been reported in the press locally as well several months ago. So it is kind of been drip fed into the community. But I think, as everything, when there's a deadline looming, people start to think, well, I need to do something about this now. So in the interim, perhaps the battery alarms would be a better option in the interim. However, it's something that's going to have to be replaced within a 10-year period. So happy to do some more research and come back to the committee at a later date, or come back to the MAUG.
Thank you very much. I think it certainly, even a round robin email with any other updated information, it's a matter that will be of considerable importance to householders throughout the islands, and if there's any update on it, I think the quickest and easiest way to get that disseminated will probably be by email. But if we do have an appropriate date for a MAUG to come back with for some further discussion, and I'm happy that take place also. I think Ian, do you want to come in, Ian Watson?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just a wee point of information. Members may recall that the original proposal to introduce the regulations was due to come into place this February 2021. But because of the COVID situation, and partly because of the COVID situation, and partly because there had been quite a backlash from the public about the lack of lead-in times this time last year, the Scottish Government extended it by a year to February next year. So in the interim, they have tried to raise the profile of it and make homeowners aware that there's a responsibility that will fall on owner-occupiers' shoulders in the not-too-distant future. But it's just to remind members that we've been at this stage about a year ago where there was concern about if there was enough notice for members of the public to get kind to this. And there's certainly been another year added on to the process to give people more time to consider it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ian. It is there, it is legislation. The purpose in having a report was just to highlight it both to members and just to have it more widely disseminated, this impending deadline. The consequences we've obviously discussed, and there is maybe a level of uncertainty in terms of insurance liabilities beyond the implementation date. Convener, you want to come in just for a final comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And just very briefly, if I could ask Angela whether there is any coordination with the work that is being done through Scottish Fire and Rescue Service in terms of putting detectors into homes, particularly as it says there for older and disabled homeowners. Is there any conversation taking place on that basis? Because I'm aware that these alarms that are installed by Scottish Fire and Rescue Service are battery operated the last 10 years, and whether that might be something that would help people who are struggling to find either a joiner to put the alarms in place, or whether it can be done by the individuals.
Thank you, Convener. Maybe just before you answer, if you haven't already had any kind of an update from local care and repair on their policy and practice to intervene in this, perhaps that's something that might be looked into and shared more widely. But if you want to come back and comment on what's been said.
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot of coordination between the local fire and rescue service and nationally as well. The fire and rescue service are willing to come out and do a free fire safety assessment of your home. And that would be, I guess, very beneficial for older people. They would get a sort of tailored breakdown of what would be required, and any sort of assistance and advice broken down to them. So I know that Fire and Rescue Service across nationally are involved in this.
Thank you very much for that. And as I said, if there's any update on how the local care and repair are planning to address this, perhaps that might be useful as well to get out to members. So that report, colleagues, is for noting. Thank you for your comments on that. The last item is just the reports outstanding. And that's just for noting. The next scheduled meeting of the committee will be on the 1st of February. And thank you all for your attendance and your contributions.